Welcome to The Big Picture, a show that takes a deep dive into the political landscape of not only the world, but right here in our own backyard of Illinois.
It's showtime, folks.
The Big Picture is on WCPT 820. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath.
Hello, everybody. It's a beautiful fall day here in the upper Midwest. And I got a lot to talk to you about today. So let's get right to it, shall we? Because, look, Trump's shambolic rule, his daily trespass on common decency, they grab all the media attention. Meanwhile, the four horsemen of Trump's apocalypse stalk the land. The first is, of course, coercion. You know, at the United Nations this week, Trump boasted, this is a quote, "We recently begun using the supreme power of the United States military to destroy Venezuelan terrorists and trafficking networks." What? I mean, never mind that attacking ships in international waters is a crime. Never mind that instead of stopping the ships to show the world that they were in fact carrying drugs, Mr. Trump simply ordered them and everyone aboard blown out of the water. He boasted that America bombed Iran. Never mind that, you know, we're not at war with Iran, but we sent our bombers. He boasted that he used the National Guard in our cities. And this morning, he ordered them into Portland. His claim is that he claimed about Washington. He said, it's the crime capital of America, but I made it totally safe after 12 days, totally safe. Nonsense. What he did was make it safe from deployed troops in American cities, coercion. And Trumpian coercion encompasses more than the use of physical force. His economic pressure, sometimes by withholding federal grants, sometimes by threatening to block mergers, sometimes by dangling federal contracts, has brought to heel great universities, powerful law firms, important media companies, big tech, and America's billionaires. Coercion. The second one, of course, is corrupt oligarchs. Every autocrat needs a powerful court, and Trump is creating his own group of oligarchic, wealthy men to serve his interests. Because of Trump's tax cuts, the country's richest 400 people, get this, have gotten $1.2 trillion richer in 1 year. If that doesn't make you sick, I don't know what will. Trump decides whether to punish or reward these super rich knee benders by imposing or removing tariffs on their industries, withholding or approving their corporate mergers, threatening them with prosecution or looking the other way from their crimes. In return, these new oligarchs dine on what used to be the White House Rose Garden and in gold-trimmed ballroom like in Mar-a-Lago. Trump is now building a room for their grand parties inside the White House, out of your tax dollars, by the way. And out of gratitude and fear, these oligarchs do his bidding, buying up media companies to spread his lies, funding his campaigns, doing his legal work, firing workers who dare to speak out against the regime. Of course, the third horseman is racism and fear. This is his favorite. Trump's gospel teaches that God made America for Americans, and by Americans, God meant white Christian men who would rule over everyone else, firmly rejecting the idea of a country built on many customs, many religions, and tolerance of difference. He told the United Nations, here's another quote, that every nation must protect their communities and prevent their societies from being overwhelmed by people that they've never seen before, with different customs and religions, with different everything. Seriously? At home, he purged women and black leaders from the military. He resurrected the reputations of secessionist slaveholders and frequently elevates the symbols of the antebellum South. He ended government efforts to improve the civil rights of Americans and launched new efforts to prosecute organizations that defend them. To sell his hatred, he counsels fear. Fear of young black men, fear of immigrants. His language is stark. People from foreign lands trample our borders, violate our sovereignty, cause unmitigated crime, and deplete our social safety net. Never mind, it's not, Attila the Hun's army coming out for our borders, but people desperate for work, people who will work in fields and pick the fruit, the vegetables, while he sows the grapes of wrath. And of course, fourth is the destruction of our planet. He told the world, we are getting rid of falsely named renewables. Climate change, he said on the stage at the UN, is the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world. And he boasted, I have a little standing order in the White House. Never use the word coal, only use the words clean, beautiful coal. Seriously? He ended our government's efforts to build a clean energy future. He expanded government efforts to produce, consume, and export fossil fuels. Danger is about the land. Danger. And these four horsemen of his ride together. Look, he promised corrupt oil industry oligarchs that he would protect their interests if they gave him money. And that's what happened. He gave corrupt oligarchs a merger they lusted after, and that got them to allow him to put a censor in the CBS newsroom. Imagine that. He stokes racism and uses fear to get what he wants. And if that fails, he uses civil and military power of government to force it. These riders are amongst us, and they will destroy everything if they can. Well, I know that's not a cheery start to Saturday, but here's the thing. We know how to stop them. We know how to stop them. Please say this out loud. We still live in a constitutional democracy, and what you do matters. We live in a constitutional democracy, and what you do matters. Ordinary citizens are sitting on grand juries and telling his crooked Justice Department, nope, can't do it, won't indict. Right? Trump got elected. He did. And he proceeded to launch the most lawless, most corrupt, most dangerous administration in American history. What you do matters. Not what he does, what you do. Love your neighbor, and hate has no power. Love yourself, and you won't bow down. Stand together, and he cannot win. Stand together. Show up at No King's Day. Organize with your friends. Tell the truth about the news. Interrupt people when they lie about it. And lift up your gaze from the stream of nonsense on your phone. Lift up your gaze. A better America is coming. All right, everybody. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, fabulous show, beginning with How Are We Fighting Back? Matt Caffrey and Swing Left in just a minute.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody. I'm joined once again by Matt Caffrey. He's Swing Left's Director of Organizing. And as you know, he joins us from time to time. Hey, Matt, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Edwin?
Good. Hey, little hard to hear you.
Let's see if we can fix that. Is that any better there?
Yeah, it's a little better. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Great
Look,
to be with you again. Always love coming on the show.
Because our audience is growing, our community here is, as we get further into this administration, the community grows. So can you tell everybody once again about Swing Left?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Swing Left was founded back in 2017, launched the same weekend as the Women's March. Basically around this idea, our founder was sitting in a coffee shop, heartbroken about the outcome of the election, worried that there was nothing he could do. He was living in Massachusetts at the time. All of his federal representatives were Democrats already. So it's like, what can he do? And he realized that, the best chance the Democrats had to put a check on the Trump administration, to stop their agenda, to hold them accountable for their wrongdoing, would be to win back the United States House in 2018. But, again, his member were Democrats, but there was a competitive House district right across the border in New York State, in New York 19. And, he was like getting ready to post on Facebook, like, hey, everybody, let's go help win New York 19 so Democrats can take back the House. When he sort of realized that people all across the country would be hungry for that kind of information about which races mattered and how to make a difference in them. And so Swing Left was really founded on that premise. What are the electoral fights each year that are really critical to the national balance of power, that can really fight back against the MAGA movement? And how can all of us, no matter where we live across the country, take action to have the biggest impact in those races so that we can, again, push back against this MAGA movement and win power and advance all the things that we all care about. And, over the last 8 years, Swing Left members have raised tens of millions of dollars for Democratic campaigns. We've knocked on millions and millions of doors, made tens of millions of phone calls, so many millions of letters written. And it's really made a critical difference in some key races. Now, at the end of the day, we all have to be humble because this whole movement was built to make sure the moment we're in now never happened again. And here we are. And this time, of course, is so much worse.
We'll talk about the lessons you've learned and how you're doing it better in a bit, I promise. But Matt, thank you for that background. Here's what I'm struggling with how to help everybody understand, because the idea of political parties is so confusing in America, in part because Democrats and Republicans are two very different kinds of political parties. The Republicans are easier to understand. They're like a European party. They have narrow ideology. They enforce ideological purity, to anybody who strays gets kicked out of the party. Republicans don't vote for individuals. They vote for the party because they know exactly what it stands for, and it's very clear about that. The Democratic Party, a little more confusing because it's a big tent, and that means it's a coalition of very diverse Americans, and we argue amongst ourselves. The party itself, the DNC, and it's like they kind of act like coordinating committees and that do fundraising. But one of the implications of that is that on our side, the grassroots energy doesn't come from the party itself. It comes from the coalition members. It comes from labor movements and civil rights movements and democracy movements and organizations like Swing Left.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think this is it's actually so hard even for people deep in this work to understand, right? Like even some of our group leaders who have been leading incredible local grassroots groups in their communities for 8 years, what the party is and how it's structured and how it's organized, it's still kind of opaque. And people talk about the Democratic Party as if it is somebody else. But, really, it's a collection of lots of us doing, narrow jobs and playing our roles. I think of the hundreds of local grassroots groups across the country that I have the privilege of supporting and empowering through. They're just normal folks. They don't have budgets. They don't have staff, but they have been working and organizing in their local communities, sending emails and planning canvases and putting together letter writing parties for years now. And they're really unsung heroes of our democracy who've just been in this fight together for a really long time. And through all of that, they've gotten really sophisticated and they're doing really great work. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The party is this amalgamation of committees that are all trying to coordinate money, and then a whole bunch of truly grassroots entities that tend to be disconnected from the party. It's kind of confusing. It's kind of messy, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that is it's confusing and in ways that hurt us sort of in the news, but structurally, I think it's profoundly healthy for America because it lets the energy. This is like people saying, well, who's your presidential candidate? I'm like, I trust that we will figure that out through a series of primaries and, campaigns, and we'll figure it out. We'll argue about it. And you know what? We'll figure it out. And I just think that's healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I can't wait. I mean, I think about the 2008 primary, which was the first presidential election that I was able to vote in. And I think that primary, for as messy and as drug out as it was, it gave our party a lot of energy, actually. I think your earlier point that the two parties are very much not mirror image. So often journalists sort of present a mirror image version of the two parties. Yep. Couldn't be more false, right? It couldn't be more wrong. And I think for us, often that healthy debate actually is creative. It is creating energy. It is creating momentum. I can't wait for 2028. I hope we get there and we have a country still to bring into that process. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's really energizing.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to have many examples next year as well. They're just not going to be at the presidential level, but this is how a country figures out how it wants to move forward, not because the boss says this is forward, but because we figure it out together. And I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think politically, though, our side has made errors in the past by focusing on campaigns. We gear up for political campaigns, right? But the other side, the Republicans and their media friends, engage in a permanent campaign to destroy the Democratic brand across the country. So it's fallen to folks, outside the party to build infrastructure that works all year long. And that brings me to ground truth. Talk about the lessons you've learned and what ground truth is.
I mentioned these local grassroots leaders that we work with, hundreds of these folks who've been leading local grassroots groups for years, and they know more than anybody that face-to-face conversations with voters are so critical. They mean so much. And also the way Democrats have been doing it is broken. And it's sort of funny to have that dichotomy, right? Like our swing left staff and our volunteers are some of the biggest believers in face-to-face conversations with voters, the hard work to go out and talk to folks about elections. And yet we also see that we start too late. We talk to too narrow a slice of the electorate. We don't have compelling ways to engage with them, deep, meaningful ways to engage with those voters. And it's just, we're not having the impact that we could have. So this year, we are piloting a new approach that we call ground truth, where we're not scaling up next fall. We are piloting, and we'll be scaling it up as quickly as possible to talk to everybody. We're going to go into our battleground districts. We're going to knock every door. And we're not there to say, here's why you need to vote for Democrats. We're there to listen and to hear people's concerns, to hear what they care about, what is moving them. It's literally like the first question that we ask is basically, how do you think the country's doing? Like, do you think we're going the right direction, wrong direction kind of thing? And we just kind of let people talk at us. And then what we're doing is we're recording as much of that interaction as possible. If the volunteer walks away from the door, they just talk into their phone and they say, they said this, they said this, they said that. We're not being judgmental. We're not trying to convince them. Right now, all we want to do is listen. And then we're going to use some AI tools to package that information up and to share it back with campaigns and the state parties so that they have real world insights about what is happening, at those doors in these critical districts. And that can drive, decisions across the campaigns, from digital ad targeting to messaging points, and we want people all across the country to be able to have these deep conversations, whether they're knocking on doors or making phone calls. We're hoping to make it possible for people everywhere across the country to have meaningful, respectful, person-to-person, conversations, not sort of robotic, if your listeners have ever knocked on a door or made a call before, it can feel very transactional, but instead we want it to feel relational. We want it to feel people are truly being listened to.
Listening is not the same thing as selling. You go to the door and you sell, and people are, they're like, they've heard that before. They're not interested. The proof of this will be if they feel heard. And that is, so when you give the stuff back to the candidates, the implied promise is we are all working to build a future together, and what you think matters. And we're gonna make sure that we hear it and think about it. I mean, we won't, do something that isn't something that's outside of our value set. But if it's in here, and you have an idea about it, we're going to pay a lot of attention.
Yeah, that's absolutely the idea. And look, it also helps us know if we are truly listening to people. Traditionally in campaigns, it's like people who are lean Republican go into some generic persuasion world. But if we've gone to somebody's door and we've heard, yeah, I voted Republican for a long time, but I'm really worried about these tariffs. I'm seeing some of the prices go up for my family. We know we've got a little entry point where we can nudge people in the right direction. Or maybe we go to somebody who's always voted for Democrats, but they're upset at Democrats for whatever reason. And I know we all have our own. We know, actually, we can't take this vote for granted. We need to go back to this person and kind of make sure we're shoring up their support. Or the last thing, and maybe the most important, people who are just discouraged or who feel like the system doesn't work and their vote doesn't matter. We often think of those people as turnout, in campaign lingo, those are turnout targets. And we often show up at their doors in the last 2 weeks of an election and think that we can persuade them to go vote. But actually, we really need to engage them deeply over a long period of time to make sure they understand and believe in the power of their vote. And so we're hoping through this process to identify those buckets of people who need real persuasion and make sure that we have real information to feed that process.
And are you, first off, I love that. And are you targeting the same kinds of high priority, important to win districts for this experiment that you normally target?
Yeah, great question. So yes, we are piloting this so far in our target House districts across the country. So today, actually, there's a group from Chicago who is out in Iowa's 1st congressional district in the eastern part of Iowa.
Very
They're
important.
piloting this tech right now. Literally right now, they're out knocking doors, which I think is fun. And it's exactly that kind of district. Iowa 1 was decided by a few points. I believe it is open. I believe that the incumbent isn't running. So a real great opportunity to flip a seat there. No, I'm sorry. That's not an open one. But yeah, a really good opportunity to flip a seat there. As folks might know, the Senate seat in Iowa is an open seat, which I think does create a lot of possibility and potential for Democrats in Iowa. So we're excited about that kind of district. So what we are targeting narrowly when it comes to the districts, but we're not targeting narrowly when it comes to the voters, because we think Democrats have left too many people out of the conversation, including, frankly, about a quarter of households just never get contacted by Democratic campaigns because we don't know enough about them to target them. So there's not consumer data, there's not political data, whatever. So about a quarter of households have been missing from Democratic campaigns forever. And we really think this approach will help us find those folks and engage them meaningfully.
Yeah, I have long butted my head up against folks who counsel for efficiency in campaigns and leave people out. And there's this little bit of schizophrenia in this. I applaud you for targeting particular places and making sure we win them. On the other hand, I applaud other folks who say, leave no district without a candidate, run everywhere. I don't believe we should, it may take 3 cycles or 4 to win in a place, but if we don't start and we don't ask, we're never going to win. So I think your ground truth operation is taking your targeting and expanding it to everybody in a district. I think it's fabulous because we should ask everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. We just assume too much about people, and folks contain multitudes, and especially after last year's election.
I like it when Walt Whitman comes in this conversation.
Exactly. I mean, I think we need to question assumptions after last year, right? There's just we cannot be just rinsing and repeating the work that we have done in past cycles, because that's why I started with done incredible work over the past several years that has helped Democrats win some really critical races. But at the end of the day, we collectively as a movement did not achieve the thing we were trying to do. And that has devastating consequences for everyone in this country and around the world. And so, we feel good about a lot of the work we've done, and we know we have to rebuild it from the ground up to do far, far better moving forward. And so, that's where really ground truth comes from. It is trying to think as big and as ambitiously as possible about the impact we could have if we sort of rethink and start from first principles and build something that is designed for the moment that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, I am glad that we continue to evolve and improve the way we do this. But I am also convinced, looking at the data from the last election, that where we acted, even in the old way that we acted, we had an impact. I mean, it was uphill. We had, we didn't have a primary. We had all kinds of issues with, I think, Joe, and I love Joe, but we had political issues at the end with the way that unfolded, and inflation was up, and Americans were, as they are today, discontent with the direction of the country, and they blame the party in power. That always happens. Where you went out and worked, you made a difference.
Yeah, and that's incredibly clear in the data. You're absolutely right. And in fact, the places that we got involved earliest, we tended to overperform, even above the places that we were scaled up but didn't get us an earliest start. So again, this is part of the evidence base that we're using for this new strategy for this year, because we really do believe if we can get an early start, get really valuable data to campaigns, and use that to feed campaigns as they build out, it can make a big difference. And yeah, we've had folks knocking in Oregon, in New York State, and now Iowa, Wisconsin, and Oregon again this weekend. So it's very early days for this pilot, but for folks who might be interested in getting involved, go to swingleft.org. You can sign up there to find out how to get involved. We'll have more options over the coming weeks, including phone banking for folks who live anywhere in the country, trips out to Iowa or Wisconsin if you live in the Chicagoland area. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for folks to get involved.
Well, I know it's fairly new, but what kinds of things are you starting to hear from people? Are you finding, common ground between progressive folks in our party and, more as they say, centrist or conservative folks when you knock on doors?
It's been really, really interesting. I think one of the things we're finding is even our volunteers who talk to a lot of voters, right? Like the people who are testing this so far are experienced volunteers, right?
Yep.
They have a certain set of expectations, and it's amazing. Like people will not fall into our expectations so often, right? There was a volunteer share story. A voter at the door was talking about how much they love RFK Jr. and all of the Maha stuff. And the volunteer's like, oh no, what's going to happen here? But then goes on to say, if President Trump was in the room, that voter would tell President Trump to sit down and shut up. So clearly, this is not a voter we should be giving up on, even though we certainly don't agree with them on everything. And I think that's what, when I said, we all contain multitudes, we're really seeing that showing up in the early conversations we're having with this. And it's so easy to reduce people down to numbers when you're working on campaigns. I mean, when you need tens or hundreds of thousands of votes or millions of votes to win, it's almost a necessity to sort of reduce down the complexity. But we're really hoping that this program and the tools that we have built out allow us to treat people as people and to engage with them deeply and meaningfully. Yeah.
I love knocking on doors. I know it's crazy, but the first political position I ever held was a local alderman, and I got that way by knocking on every door. And knocking on those doors and talking with people, listening to people. And I have never gotten out of the habit. I love doing it. And in part, people are complicated. People have ideas that don't fit comfortably together. They're interesting, but and we say to ourselves, oh, look, our side is tired. We're tired. We've been beaten down. We lost that last election. There's Trump is doing all these terrible things. We're exhausted. The other side's exhausted too. They're just, when you go out and you talk to them, they're like, yeah, he's our guy, but oh my God, like which side are we on in Ukraine this week? Or where am I going to sell my soybeans? I mean, we tend to just look at ourselves and panic when we should look at the other side and go, there is enormous opportunity for us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do think, watching his poll numbers continue to slide. We just need to make sure that what we are saying, what we have to offer the American people, is something that is vaguely interesting for them to buy, right? This isn't complicated, right? Like winning winning elections is about persuasion. It's about addition, not subtraction. And if we can just figure out how to appeal to the folks who, apparently we didn't in 2024, we can have a major victory. And, winning the House is so, so important. Just having any check on the administration's wrongdoing, any official power to investigate their wrongdoing, to hold them accountable, would make such a critical difference. And of course,
the House
in
is
2028, we
makes
need
a huge difference.
Yeah. But yes, exactly. All budgeting decisions originate in the House. Although I'm not sure that the Supreme Court fully understands that part of the Constitution. But anyway,
the Supreme Court doesn't have a House saying we want that power. Nobody has a power they won't use.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And we need to get to a federal trifecta by 2028. And, we've got to do the work this year to get us on track to do that.
I made the mistake of listening to Trump's UN speech, one of the most appalling, just appalling and embarrassing on the world stage speeches I've ever heard. But he featured a few things that I just don't think Americans really believe, and they were core to his speech. One is climate change is a hoax, a complete hoax, and we are going double down on oil, period. And old people, young people, I don't think anybody believes that. Yeah.
I mean, I think if you have lived through the, massive forest fires and the hurricanes and the heat waves, I just don't, all you have to do is be a human that exists in the world to know that something has shifted. Here in Ohio, where I'm based, even since I moved here in 2000, winters are shorter and warmer. The summers are hotter, and it's just self-evident.
Chicago has the best weather in the country. Are you kidding me? I mean, I grew up here. That did not used to be the case.
Yeah. And meanwhile, who gets to go ice skating outdoors anymore? Almost no one, which is really sad. But yeah, so
there's that
you're
one
exactly right.
Out of step. I mean, the other, sending this instinct for coercion. Sending troops to Portland today. We're having a hell of a time with ICE here in Chicago, even though we chased out the National Guard. The Americans, his poll numbers started to crater when he started to send troops into LA and DC. Yeah. Americans hate it. And again, that's opportunity, I think, for us.
Absolutely. And we are seeing this incredible groundswell of grassroots activism. So many new groups, indivisible groups and swing left groups created across the country this year. These protests that keep growing. I mean, October 18th and No King's Day is coming up. And we're seeing, for example, this incredibly important Prop 50 race in California, where California is standing up against the rigging of our elections by the president, trying to steal the next election, basically, by redrawing the lines in the middle of the decade in a completely unprecedented way. California is saying, you know what, we're going to fight back. We're going to implement temporary district lines that will help sort of counteract that rigging of the system. Our grassroots groups in California have done a tremendous job responding to this moment. Tens of thousands of door knocks and phone calls and letters. And they just stood it up overnight because they are so fired up and they're so engaged. Many of them have been organizing for a really, really long time, but we're also seeing so many new people stepping up to join the work. And I think, that's what it's going to take. And, maybe most of our institutions are bowing to the pressure, but we, the people, do not have to do that, and we have power if we fight back. And it's been really heartening for me, to be in the trenches day in and day out. It is the only way I get through the day is to see all of the incredible grassroots energy that has emerged this year.
Yeah. And, let's go back to we, the people, have power even if the institutions are bending the knee. It turns out people in the institutions have power. I know that everyone who had a Disney or a Hulu subscription and said, yeah, no, I'm not doing that, made a huge difference. But the employees of Disney also said, wait a minute, this isn't okay.
Yes.
And I am so proud of Harvard for standing up under incredible pressure. But the truth is the Harvard faculty would all quit if their board made a deal. And they've made that clear.
Yes.
So if you're in an institution, you are not powerless, even if your organization at the very top is clueless.
I've always thought about politics in this country as really being a fight between organized money and organized people. And I think that's exactly what you're saying. If an institution is just operating as organized money, well, then it's going to go a particular way. But when we organize as people, shoulder to shoulder, either as workers or as shareholders or whatever, as neighbors,
consumers, as neighbors,
that is how
right?
we fight back. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and that takes us past. I mean, for a lot of Americans, politics is just noise. They aren't you and me who follow this every minute. And probably not good for our health, right? But it intrudes on their life, and they're like, "Yeah, when are we going to do something important? I don't have to listen to this." But that's also an opportunity for us because they're going to say, "I want to buy coffee, but it's too expensive." Okay, well, there's an opportunity there. Or I liked watching Jimmy Kimmel. Wait a minute, what happened to him? There's an opportunity there. Or I am trying to get across my city, but there are these troops in the way. There's an opportunity there. Oh, by the way, ICE in Chicago, you'll love this, man. Yesterday, they took to the Chicago River in boats, with their automatic weapons, right? Like, wait a minute. The Chicago River is not a border between anything but one part of Chicago and the next. Like, what are they doing floating around the river? And the only thing I can think of is that they're guarding Trump Tower. Because, gosh. Because that's not even a part of the city.
Suspicious of the folks. Yeah, they're just really worried about the architectural boat tours. That's the secret smuggling operation.
This is our tax dollars at work. And when you say things like that to people, they roll their eyes and they go, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me."
Yeah.
So we have a lot of opportunity.
So much. And right, as the consequences of all of the cuts, all of the attacks, all of the corruption become more evident in people's lives, they will wake up, right? I mean, I'm a dad to 3 young kids. If I didn't do this work, I don't know that I just wouldn't have very much space in my life to follow every beat, and I think so many Americans live that way. It's not that they don't care. It's not that they don't have good values, but they are busy trying their lives. There's a lot going on. It is hard out there. And so they don't always pay enough attention. And sometimes I feel like they get tricked by misinformation and the right lies. But it's kind of hard to deny when you see, an armored vehicle rolling through your town past your kid's elementary school, as happened to one of our staff members earlier this week, or when the prices of the grocery store are insane. My 5-year-old understands this because he was like, "Why are they making the Switch 2 so expensive?"
Right.
Look, these things break through to people eventually, and so we just have to keep up the drumbeat, keep organizing, keep talking to people, keep listening to people, and I go back and forth about how hopeful I am about our future, but I've got to tell you, it's just seeing the fight that people are putting up, seeing that even Sinclair backs down on Jimmy Kimmel. I got to say, I did not expect that. When we fight, we win, and we
when we fight, we win. When people protested local TV station in Chicago, WGN, the sort of most Chicago stations, people were protesting it because it's Nexstar, and they wanted to make them change their mind, and they did. These big corporate entities are one thing, but their local affiliates really feel the pressure, and that's an opportunity again for us.
Absolutely.
So when you're out talking to people, do they say, hey, we're in the midst of 10 national emergencies? Do they feel this, right? The Trump and the Republican Congress have said, well, there's this emergency and there's that emergency and there's this third emergency, all of which give the president extraordinary powers. Do Americans think we're in the midst of all these emergencies?
From the conversations we've been having with voters, the hundreds of them, I can say I think 0 people have said we're in the middle of any national emergencies,
right.
Other than maybe when Kimmel was canceled. That might have been perceived as no, I kid, but no, of course not. And but that doesn't mean that people don't have concerns, right? Like obviously. But I think if they're, the most urgent thing feels like, what we've been talking about. Why are there troops in my neighborhood? Or, Why are my neighbors being snatched out of the school pickup line? It's just that's the kind of thing that seems to really be
appalling,
kind of reaching that pitch for folks.
Yeah, Sinclair caved, as you say. You didn't expect that, but here's something else that I find very encouraging. That paragon of all things. American Pete Hegseth, among his other, ridiculous decisions, dangerous decisions, was the one that says, you will not get a press pass. You will not be allowed in the Pentagon unless you promise to report only the things I tell you can report.
Yeah.
And so far, no news organizations, not even Fox, has agreed to sign that agreement. And if they all get thrown out of the Pentagon, you know what? They'll just have to report the old-fashioned way. They'll have to get sources. They'll have to do the work. And the only thing we won't hear from them are the press conferences of the Pentagon. So I'm all for it.
Heaven forbid that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But they didn't sign up. They didn't cave this time. It's, I think we learned lessons. We were shocked. Actually. Right? I mean, I think the era of caving is coming. There'll still be examples of it, but I think people saw the shame of the first law firms, the shame of Columbia University, and they're greedy. They know what they can get from the president, but they don't, and their employees don't want to go down that road. And I think we're beginning to see that, and I love that.
And, I hope the Kimmel moment is illustrative, too, because, they inadvertently magnified him far more than he ever could have on his own, right? I mean, the tens of millions of people who watched his return, and now he's back nationwide, right? And so they did blatantly corrupt, disgusting, anti-First Amendment, anti-American stuff, and it backfired. And I hope that puts some steel in folks' spines when they're deciding whether or not to stand up to the outrageous demands that come from this administration.
Yeah, well, I think it has. And that's why the administration is moving to its more coercive side, because they aren't convincing Americans. It's dangerous for sure. We talked about the California election, big thing coming up with that gerrymandering referendum, but there are elections in Virginia and elections in New Jersey. Are you focused there as well?
Yeah, Virginia particularly, and it's worth mentioning. You have a long history
in Virginia.
Absolutely. We've been working in Virginia since 2017, since basically we were a brand new organization. And, this time is the first time we're working on a lieutenant governor's race, the first time we're working on an attorney general's race anywhere in the country, which is exciting. And, the attorney general is worth mentioning because these Democratic attorney generals are the reason we keep getting, courts freezing Trump policies and blocking some of his worst abuses, because when we have Democratic attorney generals, they have the seat that you need to hold to fight back in the courts. And, look, the Supreme Court is letting us down over and over again, but it still matters that this is happening. And so, we have an opportunity to restore a Democratic trifecta in Virginia. That's obviously going to be very good news for the people of Virginia. It also puts us on a trajectory to win 2 competitive seats in Virginia next year. Virginia 7, where Eugene Vindman is a Democratic freshman we need to protect, and then down in Virginia 2, where we have a real opportunity to flip a seat. Virginia 2 may have the largest share of veteran voters anywhere in the country. Huge share of the vote there are veterans. We've seen this administration's attacks on veterans every which way. So I think there's a real opportunity to flip that district. And, they're Republican
including
representatives.
firing hundreds of thousands of them out of the federal government.
Exactly. And, their Republican representative made light of that. She was basically like, who cares? And so, look, we are motivated to win this year because it really, really matters. And we are motivated to carry that momentum into next year to help us win back the House by flipping that district, protecting Eugene Vindman, I should say American hero Eugene Vindman, who folks will remember from the first administration. So, yeah, there's a lot of good work to be done in Virginia. And Virginia and California, what's awesome about those two opportunities is you can take action no matter where you live. If you go to swingleft.org, you can find phone banks, you can find letter writing or postcard writing opportunities, and you can take action on either Virginia or California, which helps us kind of move in the direction of winning back the House next year and starting to it's going to be a long journey back to defeating the MAGA movement, but these are the first steps that we need to take.
Yeah. Working together, I've had this conversation with Ezra Levin of Indivisible, that when you bring people together for this work, it's joyous. It's not, and people end up loving it, and they make friends, and they build community, and it builds community. It makes places healthier. And Matt, I think government does a lot of things that are important, and it's about, I think, going to get shut down. I don't know how anybody reaches an agreement because the Republicans are determined to give Donald Trump a blank check and have the budget be meaningless and just give him the money, and Democrats can't vote for that. So the government's likely going to shut down, and Russ Vought says that's great because I don't believe in government, so I'm going to fire everybody. It does mean that for the first time in many generations, Americans are on our own, at least as far as the federal government is concerned. It doesn't care about us, doesn't want to help us, doesn't want to be part of our lives. It's like, nope, we're done. We're washing our hands of you. We have some contracts we want to give to our friends, but basically we don't care about Americans. So the work you do, the organizing work you do, has a double benefit. It is certainly politically powerful, but it helps people with a sense of community that we are going to need when our government abandons us.
Absolutely. And, we're even, we're really interested in the idea of like mutual aid networks and people coming together in community to support each other. Obviously, no matter what happens this year, no matter what happens in 2026, the next few years are going to be hard because exactly what you said, the government is being run by folks who do not care about any of us. They only care about themselves and handing out contracts to their buddies, right? So we know we have to be in this together. When we organize politically, it is good for our mental health. It is good for our democracy. It helps us win. But it also builds that community that is the foundation of social health. The former, forgive me.
I'm so glad this is happening to you because you're much younger than I am.
No, I know.
It makes me feel better.
Yeah. Well, the epidemic of loneliness is what I was trying to remember. It is showing up in our lives in so many ways. And I really do, we do see in our local groups a real counteract to that. People are coming together. They have that community. They have that sense that they're not in this alone. And especially with all of the chaos and all the insane stuff that's happening, I just think that's more important than it's ever been.
I do too. And that's why I just applaud your effort. And to go back to where I started, or at least where we started early on, this is what the Democratic Party is. It's a pile of groups like Swing Left that, it's not a thing in itself. It is the constituencies that make it up. So all this stuff that you're talking about, mutual aid, helping each other, supporting people through a difficult time, building community with each other. The groups that do this is what defines the Democratic Party, not what's going on at the DNC this week.
Yeah. And I think we just need to remember we are all called to do more than we have done before, right? We're all called to go outside of our comfort zone. We are in a very dangerous moment for our country, and we all should step up in whatever ways we can, we have to do that together, because the road ahead is hard, and we are not going to, none of us can do this as an island. And I think coming together in community with others, whether we frankly be in person and local or online, right? People find all sorts of communities and support, in other spaces. I'm not here to tell people which to pick, but having that community is so critically important to just getting through the next few years and to restoring our democracy at the end of this crisis.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people, look, if you love your neighbor, hate doesn't have any power. That's a big part of Trump's push. Take it away from him.
Yeah.
If you love yourself, you won't bow down. And if you stand together, he can't win. So look up, guys. Yeah. If we do these things, we win.
In Chicago, fighting back against the National Guard being deployed, I mean, we are winning. Like, there are so many ways that we are winning. There's still lots of terrible things happening, but we see the special election results where Democrats are having absolutely insane over performances.
Yep.
Examples like Jimmy Kimmel, examples like Chicago fighting back. Over and over again, even at the hyper local level, like an individual immigrant, their community stands up and fights back and struggles to get them returned to the community, and they are winning, right? So
absolutely,
it's just we just have to hold each other close and keep in the fight. And we are there are days that I think all of us feel like we're going crazy, but we are going to get through this.
No, look, it's after D-Day. We are going to win. But that doesn't mean that we won't lose some battles, and there won't be terrible losses and terrible struggle along the way, because we are fighting a foe that has a lot of power and is not afraid to use it to hurt people. So no question, there are going to be casualties, and they're ugly. But we are on the right side, and we are going to win if we stand together. And we're brave.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I just think we are. All right, tell people in the minute and a half we have left, what's the best way to be part of ground truth, or just to get involved in the, in the phone banks. Tell people how to do it, Matt.
Go to swingleft.org, sign up. We will let you know about ways to join a local group, to make phone calls to California or Virginia, to write letters, to go to a ground truth canvas in one of the battleground districts if you're able to go. We're going to have a lot more to say about other fights we need to win next year. Like, we'll have more to say, for example, on the Senate. There's so much going on. I want to encourage people to sign up for Swing Left. I promise our emails are like the best in the business. We are not harassing people. You don't get a million. And it's also not just fundraising. We ask folks to take action, to learn more. It's actually a good list. I promise. and I think that's the best way folks can get involved today.
As always, Matt, it's great for you to join us, and thank you for the work.
Thank you so much for having me again. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, take care. All right, everybody, we're going to take a break for the news, and we're going to talk immigration when we come back.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, we are back. It's a little after 2 o'clock here in the upper Midwest, and I'm joined by Aaron Reichlin-Melnick. He is senior fellow at the American Immigration Council. Oh my gosh, they do important work right now. Aaron, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, I am delighted, and I've actually wanted to talk to you for a long time. But before you and I get started, will you tell everybody about the American Immigration Council?
Yeah, the American Immigration Council is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the belief that immigrants are a vital part of our society, and ensuring that we can defend their rights and the value of immigration through impact litigation, research, policy advocacy, and even volunteer work on the ground, where we help connect pro bono attorneys to people held in detention centers. So we do a little bit of everything, but our core belief is that immigration is valuable to this country and should be defended.
Yeah, well, right now we have to defend, I guess, immigrants and anybody who looks like an immigrant from a really dangerous supposedly law enforcement action. At the UN this week, Trump said, I just want to read you the quote: "People from foreign lands trample our borders, violate our sovereignty, cause unmitigated crime, and deplete our social safety net." I'm guessing you don't agree with him.
I certainly don't. And look, I can agree that the situation at the border in the last 4 years wasn't great. There were a number of things the Biden administration did wrong in response to a surge of people seeking protection and opportunity in the United States that did overwhelm the asylum system. But the overwhelming majority of those people just wanted safety and a better life. And to the extent that there were some people who were bad actors, they were the slim, tiny minority of the people who came. They were not destroying this country. They could be dealt with through standard law enforcement tools without fundamentally reshaping how we think about immigration in this country.
Yeah, well, we have largely ended immigration, I think, and numbers are way down. I mean, even immigration of very highly skilled workers that the economy needs now are charged $100,000 to get that visa.
Yes, it's true that numbers at the border are down. Certainly, legal immigration, the impacts are just starting to be felt. There are so many people still in line, waiting in extensive backlogs, that we haven't seen a wholesale collapse in illegal immigration. But certainly, we are seeing a lot of people around the world taking a look at the United States and saying, wow, this isn't the country I thought it was.
Yeah, like Korean workers.
Exactly. And we are, for generations, we were the country that the best and the brightest wanted to come to. And if we have these high-skilled workers looking at this country and saying, no thanks, that's going to hurt us in the long term.
Yeah, China's already put out a special visa to attract them. Yep, absolutely. Well, I mean, Trump's reason for this was also, I think, clear in his UN speech. He also said, let me find this: "Every nation must protect their communities and prevent their societies from being overwhelmed by people they've never seen before, with different customs, religions, with different everything." Aaron, that just feels like a repudiation of American values to me.
The nation of immigrants is a nation of different cultures, a nation where people come here and they become American. And of course, this country has not always been perfectly open to immigrants. Our very first federal immigration law in history was an anti-Chinese immigration law. And for 30, 40 years in the early 20th century, we blocked off immigration and an openly, racist Immigration and Nationality Act designed to stop people from coming. But over the last 60 years, really, we have leaned into this idea that we are a nation of immigrants, and we've seen how much that has strengthened this country. And we built arguably the strongest engine of assimilation ever seen in world history. But that is under attack right now. And certainly the president's comments don't reflect what's still happening on the ground in immigrant communities around the country, where people are people who love America and who are learning our cultural societies and building a better fabric. And I think that's what's so concerning.
Yeah, I mean, this old notion of melting pot, where everybody comes here and becomes American, and by say becomes American, it becomes what was America before they got here. I think we have a better view now that everybody comes and brings something to the table. Instead of a melting pot, you have a smorgasbord. You have a whole bunch of different flavors that everybody can enjoy. I mean, people bring their culture. Yes, they become America, but America also grows. I mean, we aren't the same country we were in 1790, thank God.
That's right. And I've also heard salad bowl as a good metaphor, because there as well, the other ingredients build on the salad and make it better. And rather than a melting pot where everybody becomes a singular mass.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about ICE. I mean, you've seen this. Why are they masked?
So from the beginning, I've been clear. There are agents who do have genuine worries about harassment of themselves or their families. The problem is they are law enforcement officers, and it is their duty to carry out the law in a way that doesn't exacerbate the situation. And to the extent that some of them do have legitimate, genuine concerns, my fear is that by DHS and ICE leaning into these masks, leaning into this militaristic vision of officers deployed in flak jackets, they are creating a negative feedback loop where their very worries about creating more, about people targeting them is leading people to targeting them, because they aren't being seen even as, individualized officers, just masked men. And the agency has a duty and has a responsibility to bring down the temperature here, and could do so by telling their officers, act professionally, wear badges, treat the public with respect. But this is an administration that wants to intimidate, and it wants to send a message to the 13 to 14 million undocumented immigrants in the country. You need to leave before we get you. And to send that message, they have to invoke fear. And I don't think we should want a law enforcement agency who is deliberately invoking fear in communities.
I'm so frustrated by this, because we have in America long experience with law enforcement. We have police forces all over the country, and they've learned lessons. They have learned that it helps them do their job to wear their badge, to identify who they are, that we've worked long and hard to build more trusting relations between police and communities. And in Chicago, that hasn't always gone so well. But in places that have, where it has gone well, you found communities that cooperate and make it more, make law enforcement more effective. And when you use force in communities, police have learned the hard way that a great deal of training has to go on to learn how to de-escalate situations, how to avoid excessive force. And I think none of these lessons are welcome at ICE. I mean, I don't know if they're well trained. I think you're right. They are certainly not discouraged from masking up. And how do we train them if administration fires lawyers, as we learned they did in July, just for telling them what the law requires?
Yeah, it's a serious problem, and it's exacerbated by the fact that a lot of these law enforcement agents doing this immigration enforcement right now have not ever done anything like this before. Because it's important to understand that for decades, ICE operated in an operational posture where most of the people that they took into custody were people who were already in law enforcement custody, people who had been arrested for an offense or were in jail or prison already at a local or state or federal law enforcement facility. So a far smaller portion of the agency involved going out into communities and arresting people. And when they did that, we're looking at, on average, on an annual basis, 30 to 50,000 arrests a year that occurred in communities, which may seem like a lot, but when you look at that in terms of the overall population, it's fairly minimal. And most of their officers weren't doing that. They were going to jails and literally just transferring custody. And at the same time, you had an entire other component of ICE called ICE Homeland Security Investigations, which was a criminal law enforcement arm aiming to go after things like drug traffickers, pedophiles, a lot of very serious real crimes. And they were working also in different ways. They weren't just randomly arresting immigrants on the street. So what you're seeing in these past 4 or 5 months is just a complete reorientation of how the agency has done its work to something that has never existed before in the history of ICE. And so they're starting from scratch, and they're basically untrained in how to do this. in a lot of ways. And they're bringing in DEA agents, ATF agents, FBI agents, IRS financial crimes investigators to do this, which means that from a management perspective, it's a mess. There's no clear chain of command. Nobody really knows how to do it. They've never been trained to do this. And the result is the chaos that we see.
Well, in Chicago, a Mexican man was killed by ICE 2 weeks ago. And ICE, they initially said the man dragged our agent behind his car when he fled, and our agent was able to pull a gun and shoot him while he was being dragged by the car. Turns out that's not true. We don't have the kind of oversight that anybody can trust of ICE, as again, police forces around the country have civilian oversight. They have, because building trust and having a method to hold them accountable for use of force in our cities is so important in a democracy. These guys are operating in a way that is unaccountable, and that's phenomenally dangerous.
Yes, and not just that, they are actively trying, the administration is actively trying to restrict oversight. In March of this year, just a couple of months after taking office, the Trump administration officially announced it was going to eliminate an internal watchdog called the DHS Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. And the justification they gave was that oversight obstructed immigration enforcement and, quote, was undermining DHS's mission, because they were trying to tell the agents, yeah, you do have to follow procedure. Yeah, you do need to respect people's rights. And so this administration views those internal checks and balances as a problem.
Yeah, Aaron, you're too polite. The law about what you can and can't do is not, I wouldn't call that an internal check and balance. I would say there's law, and you have to comply with it. Just the same thing they're telling people who are here undocumented. We have every right to say to ICE agents, follow the law. And ignorance of the law, even if your agency is saying we're going to keep you ignorant of the law, shouldn't protect you.
That's exactly right. And certainly, when I say, that they're worried about the internal, it's because there were oversight bodies inside the agency, and they have been completely sidelined. They cut the staff by about 80 to 90%. And not just internal oversight, external oversight. There is a law which says that members of Congress can go to in any facility where an immigrant is being detained by DHS and conduct a surprise inspection. And they've simply declared we're not going to follow that law because they don't want anyone to see what is happening. Because when it's just immigrants who are detained saying, oh, my God, what you're doing in these detention facilities is awful, they just claim, well, those people are lying. Or if a member of Congress sees it with their own eyes.
What do we do about that? How do we force them to follow the law? Pam Bondi's not going to enforce the law. How do organizations like yours, do you take them to court? And, how do we get this lawlessness under control?
A couple of things. One, court battles are still humping. Yes, the administration has dragged its feet on a lot of court orders. Yes, in some cases, as with the deportation to El Salvador, they outright defied court orders, but the courts are in some ways still holding them in check on things. For example, there's a new policy that they've instituted that they are denying the right to see an immigration judge and seek bonds to millions of people. And they have lost effectively every single federal court case so far on this, and people are getting bond hearings as a result. So there is perspective stroking. And second, oversight in front of the public getting eyes on this, sharing stories, letting politicians know that this matters to you is working. The administration is not omnipotent. One great example of this, earlier this week, a video emerged in New York City of an ICE officer shoving a woman to the ground, a sobbing woman at an immigration court whose husband had just showed up for his hearing and been put into detention, and she was pleading with an ICE officer, and he threw her to the ground violently. And in one of the first instances that I've ever heard of this,
it was terrible. Yeah, it was terrible.
Exactly. It was an awful video. But that officer was taken off of duty, and DHS said that was unacceptable. And that is one of the first times that I have ever seen this administration admit anything that an ICE officer did was wrong. That is a sign that video matters. getting these things, recording them, distributing them, letting people see what is happening is making a difference. And the public opinion on the administration is souring on immigration quite badly. We are in a period of backlash. I think a lot of people under Biden thought, the border did get out of control, and we maybe do need to enforce the law a bit more harshly. But what they bought was this Trump idea that it was only going to be the worst of the worst they were going to get. It was only going to be the criminals. And this administration has just torn that idea up, and we need to make the American public realize that and truly appreciate what is happening.
Well, what do we know about the facilities that people are being detained in? I mean, I found this, I guess now closed, I don't know if it's closed, Alligator Alcatraz, indistinguishable from a concentration camp. I mean, you take, whole populations, don't bother with judicial hearings and lock them up. That's historically what these camps were. I mean, not the death camps later, but the concentration of people camps. That's not a new idea, and it sure looked like Alligator Alcatraz. What do they look like? It was because have we had any?
Yeah, the Everglades detention camp is unique. It was the first ever such facility like that. But the immigration detention system has been steadily growing for decades now. It previously peaked at the highest level ever of holding an average of 55,000 people a day at any given time in 2019 under Trump. Under the Biden administration, after COVID and quarantine restrictions caused the system to shrink dramatically, but its growth has really been bipartisan. And immigration detention has always been bad. Studies have shown consistently that the number one determinant of whether somebody wins their case and gets to stay in the country in immigration court is whether they're detained or not. Because when you're in detention, you're far away from your family, you're away from your lawyers, you're away from your sport, you're not working your job, so you can't afford to fight. And many of these people have never been detained before. They've never been in jail before. So the psychological impact is significant. But what this administration has done is supercharge detention. And I think it's crucial for people to understand the goal is not to detain people and keep them here. The goal is to detain them so that they give up, so that they look at their options and they say, I don't want to fight to stay. And we are seeing this happen more and more. People are being pressured. They're being told, if you choose to stay and fight your case, and you might have a chance of winning, they're not told that. These are people who may actually have chances of winning their cases and staying here legally. But what ICE officers are telling them you're in detention. Your options are either you stay and you fight your case and we're going to keep you in jail for 8 months, or sign this paper and you'll be out next week and deported and own your home country and you can restart your life there. And the worse the conditions get, the more overcrowded these detention centers get, the more chaotic these arrests are, the more people they can get to take this and do their dirty work for them, to give up before a deportation order gets issued by a judge.
And are they threatening to send people to countries they don't know still? I'll send you to Sudan.
And that's another thing this administration has done that we've never seen before. And sometimes it's just a tacit threat, and sometimes it's an explicit threat. They are telling people either you agree to be deported or we'll send you to Uganda, or we'll send you to Eswatini, an absolute monarchy. We'll send you to your other countries.
And just to be clear, they're not saying that. They're not saying that to
Honduras,
Ugandans,
Mexico. Yeah. They're telling people from, countries that we're going to send you to a country you've never been to before. That is happening more often. Mexico is taking people from other countries. Honduras and Guatemala have agreed to take basically anyone from a Spanish-speaking country. So we're hearing right now that they've signed a deal with Honduras that says that they will take some asylum seekers. And the administration is using that as an excuse to ask judges to terminate tens of thousands of asylum applications from people who don't live in Honduras, from Guatemalans, from Venezuelans, from Ecuadorians, from others, and saying, you don't even have a right to apply for asylum anymore because under the law, we can send you to Honduras, even if you've never been there before, even if Honduras doesn't have a functioning asylum system.
It's just brutal. What did you make this week? When ICE detained is such a nice word for such an ugly thing, the superintendent of the Des Moines Public Schools. What did you make of that?
I am waiting for more facts to come in on that situation. Obviously, the person had, the superintendent had passed employment verification processes before, but those systems aren't perfect. He'd apparently been in the United States for over 20 years. Certainly, ICE says that he was here as a visa overstay and had an order of removal issued against him last year under the Biden administration for failure to appear at a court hearing. And the thing that I have learned in working in immigration for years is that sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. And it is, in these individual cases, sometimes it is just better to sit and wait for the facts to come in.
But one fact is clear. He doesn't qualify as the worst of the worst.
No, certainly not. And I think to the extent that this administration is losing, it's the American public is realizing this. They claim all the time every person is the worst of the worst. They have a website where they list all the people they claim are the worst of the worst. One of the people is on that list for misdemeanor drug possession. And certainly that is a crime. No one would deny that. But I don't think there's any person in the country who would argue that being a drug user makes you the worst of the worst. And the reality is there just aren't that many undocumented immigrants who are serious criminals. Most undocumented immigrants, studies have shown this over and over again, they commit crimes at a lower rate than Americans. So the overwhelming majority of the undocumented population who's been here for 10 plus years is generally law-abiding. Yep.
And nobody's defending staying here illegally. If you commit crimes, go to jail, and the ICE guys can pick you up in the jail. But this round up everybody who you think, what about the Supreme Court saying, hey, you know what, this is such an emergency, go ahead and racially profile?
Yeah, I think that has just put fear in a lot of people. And what's particularly galling about that, the Supreme Court didn't explain itself, but in a concurrence, Justice Kavanaugh said, look, effectively, he said, to bring the legalese down, it's just not that big of a deal if a U.S. citizen is briefly detained, because if ICE, questions you about whether you're here legally and you show you're a citizen, it's just going to be a quick. But that's not true. And we've seen U.S. citizens detained for hours. In Washington, D.C., a lawsuit was just filed on behalf of a man with legal status, temporary protected status, who's been here for 25 years, who was detained and held overnight, who told the officers who arrested him, I have papers. And they said, no, you don't, illegal. And of course, when somebody checked, he did. He was here legally. And a supervisor eventually ended up apologizing to him. But Justice Kavanaugh's, way of just saying, oh, it's just not that big of a deal. It's obviously a big deal for people to be detained, even for 10 minutes, even for 20 minutes, and it puts fear in people's hearts.
Fear, absolutely. Justice Kavanaugh is yeah. All right. Well, Aaron, tell people, because we're basically out of time, tell them how they can get involved and be helpful.
Yeah, you can look at our website at AmericanImmigrationCouncil.org. It's especially great if you want to learn about the system. We have a fact sheet on basically every aspect of the immigration justice system. And you can also check out our immigration justice campaign if you're a lawyer or you speak Spanish and you're interested in volunteering, where we've got a lot of great opportunities there for people who want to do something.
All right, Aaron, thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation.
Thank you very much for having me on.
You bet. All right, we'll be right back. Don't go away.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. Hello there. I'm really thrilled to be joined by Dick Toffel. He led ProPublica, founded and led ProPublica from 2007 to 2021. ProPublica launched into a world that was already full of great journalism, and still he managed to lead this startup to,
gobs of Pulitzer Prizes, Peabody Awards, Emmys. I mean, really remarkable thing to do in the world of journalism. He didn't do this out of the blue. He had experience at the Wall Street Journal in leadership roles for years. He's won just about every prize an adult can win for contributions to the journalism industry. And, you know, among other things, and we've talked about this before on my radio show, the American Journalism Project, where he is an important advisor helping to save local journalism around the country. He's also the author of a very thoughtful Substack newsletter called Second Rough Draft. And he's written a bunch of books, maybe even one about Babe Ruth, if I read that correctly.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Well, welcome. It's so nice to talk to you.
No, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I mean, I have so many topics I want to talk to you about, and I'm not sure which order is best, but maybe I'll start with what you wrote and I read this morning, your sort of newest piece, because it's just so hard to get your arms around, which is like, how do Americans consume information? What's a news source? What isn't a news source? And how do we think about that in the world we're in?
Yeah. So the point I was trying to make this morning, Edwin, is that you know, I think in the news business, people have been thinking too much about news sources being limited to news organizations. And on the other end of the, on the receiving end, it's obviously not that way. I mean, just this week, right, is Jimmy Kimmel a news source? I think the answer has to be for a certain number of people, absolutely yes.
Oh,
is Joe Rogan a news source? Is the screen in your elevator that gives you the news a news source? If you look at it, it sure is. And is your weather app a news source of a sort? On our corporate websites and our government websites. So, from the perspective of the news business, which is how I try to think about it, I think we need to really open up our minds and remember it's not just us and the other news outlets who are in the news business from the consumer end. It's wherever they get information they consider news.
So let me add a third element to that and ask you about it, because news consumers and news producers are the two that you talked about. But there are people who want to make news too. So I'm thinking from the political perspective, yep. The political world has gone a long way to being responsible for journalism not being the main source of news. And we can deliver our news in a lot of ways. We can go on Joe Rogan. We can make news on our own. And, you know, we can, and somehow the benefit that comes from trained journalism is being eroded in a world where the people who want to make news can pick whatever source they want, whatever platform they want, with whatever person they want to make that news.
Yeah, I must say, first of all, I don't think the people in politics have been leading this. I think they've been following it, right? And some have been following it more rapidly than others.
Yeah.
So that's a thing, right? I mean, you either wake up to the way the world is changing or you don't. And the people who wake up to the ways the world is changing sooner usually get a benefit.
Yep.
So that's one thing. The second thing is I actually have more faith in the consumers that they ask often or ultimately the right questions themselves. So yes, people in politics can pick ways to avoid traditional news outlets, but I'm not sure it's as effective as we sometimes convince ourselves it is. I mean, look, for instance, the president's approval ratings are pretty terrible, right? They are historically terrible. He's at roughly 40% approve of his job performance. So one way to think about that, which is worse than anybody except his own first term, and now it's getting close to that.
Yep.
So what does that mean? Well, first of all, it means 40% still approve of the job he's doing. Good for him. It also means, however, that literally 1 in 5, roughly, of the people who voted for him do not approve of the job he's doing. So where are they getting that? How are they forming an opinion that they don't approve of the job of the candidate for whom they voted is doing? And I think it is from the news broadly conceived.
But is it broadly conceived to include the prices you see when you go to the grocery store and try and buy coffee? I mean, then any information here is informing their judgment.
Well, of course, right? But that is as it should be, right? I mean,
I agree.
Right? I mean, if we start living in a world where don't believe what you see at the grocery store, only believe what you read in Pravda, that's not a good world.
No, it's not a good world.
So sure. But I think a lot of it, when they in turn turn it into a judgment, a political judgment, is informed by what people are consuming that they would regard as news.
That's important. So let's talk about journalism and opinion journalism for a minute. For years, newspapers published editorials and opinions, and I guess they did it because the publishers controlled the presses and the means to get their view out. But readers gave it credibility because they kind of assumed that at least the people writing it were reading the news, that they were consumers of good news and they were informed to make these judgments. I have a sense today that in some of the news outlets that exist in America, it's the reverse is true, that the news department reads the editorials and decides what assignment decisions to make. And I worry about that.
Yeah, I'm sure there are outlets where that happens. I think that it doesn't happen at the good ones. And, I think one of the things that the internet broadly has produced are two very different phenomena with respect to the reporting of news and the provision of opinion. On the news side, the internet and everything that's come along with it has resulted in a significant contraction in the supply of news. There are fewer newspapers, there are fewer reporters, there's less original reporting being done.
Sure.
There's lots of statistics on this. I think it's broadly understood. But on the opinion side, it's actually completely different, right? The complete flattening of barriers to entry has led to an unbelievable proliferation in the provision of opinion. So, I mean, you mentioned my Substack. I get to write this newsletter, which I offer to people for free. And one of the things that's sort of bizarre to me is more people actually read that than would read it if I placed it as a series of opinion columns in the leading journalism sites in the country, or what remains of the leading journalism magazines.
I'm having the same experience on Substack.
Right.
Yep.
Which is, it's bizarre. I've literally never spent $1 marketing it. But you have this enormous explosion of sources of opinion, and anybody can provide one.
Well, I mean, but how do people then judge what to trust? I mean, way back in the day, you walk out of the cave and there's a guy sitting in front and he says there's a tiger to the left and there's food to the right. And you got to decide whether you believe him, right? Because it's a very important decision. You die if you go left, or maybe not if he's just making it up. How do people know who to trust?
Well, I think, first of all, mostly, honestly, trial and error. Brands do make a difference, and to some extent, individuals and other things are becoming brands increasingly. But, recommendations. One of the things, I also think the trust crisis, what people are often describe as the crisis in trust in news, is very badly understood. To me, my favorite analogy about it is it's just the same as the Congress, which is to say, Nobody trusts the Congress, right? You take polls, like 10% of the American people approve of the Congress. Maybe it's
sure, but they
15.
like their own representative.
Exactly, right? And so this is the thing, right? Nobody likes the Congress. Nobody likes the Congress when it's run by the Republicans. Nobody likes it when it's run by the Democrats. When members of Congress run for re-election, they get re-elected at rates over 90%.
Yep.
So do people trust the news? Much less than they used to. Do they trust the news they themselves choose to consume? I think actually even more than they would acknowledge.
Well, if we are self-sorting, so the news we consume is just the feedback loop of confirmation bias, that would help people like it. I mean, maybe we are better than that.
But I don't really honestly, I mean, I think people who consume a great deal of news and to whom news is very salient do a certain amount of that. But I actually think that average people who don't care a great deal about the news and who do not consume a great deal of news, I don't think they are self-sorting in the same way. I mean, I think one of the very biggest disconnects in the country is the government is run by people on both sides, on all sides, who think that the world consists of everyone tuning into Fox News and CNN and MSNBC, when in actual America, almost no one statistically is doing any of that.
Right. They certainly don't pay for news.
Well, no, but it's not just paying for news. Cable television news is 90% of Americans are not watching.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Right. So if the people who are running public affairs in this country are living in a world that is fewer than 10% of the people, and more than 90% of the people are living in a different world, that is a big part of how we get these disconnects.
Yeah. That's interesting. But that goes to what you were talking about earlier of the proliferation of news sources, these different sources, because people do get news. They just get it in their own way.
No, that's absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, all right. So this is an odd time for journalism. Would you call this a dangerous time for journalism?
Oh, I think it's a dangerous time for the country.
Yeah.
I think it's a dangerous time for almost all of our constitutional guarantees, and a free press and free speech are among the most important constitutional guarantees. So yes, I think it's a dangerous time for them.
I mean, I hear people. I'm in Illinois. I hear people talking about Elijah Lovejoy, right? He was right. For those of you who don't know, Elijah Lovejoy was a anti-slavery advocate, and he published anti-slavery articles in journalism. And in the 1830s, a mob threw his press in the river and murdered him. I mean, are we like in that period of rancor?
No, at least not yet.
Yeah.
And obviously, one hopes we're not headed in that direction. But, when the chairman of the FCC does his best mafia impression, literally, we can do this the hard way or the easy way. That's a really frightening moment when, right?
I want to ask you a question just about that, and we'll get back to the rest of the answer. So to go back to connect that to your first comment. So Jimmy Kimmel comes back on the air, and he has Robert De Niro play the FCC chairman in his mafia acting role. So this insight that you have, Jimmy Kimmel also had and made it point of. So Americans who watched that, and there were a lot, because it was get exactly this point, and it goes to like how does reality get into our heads? It's interesting.
Yeah, no, and in that sense, I think that it's only Thursday, but so far this week has been a pretty good week for the free press. For whatever reasons, probably the flip side of the craven reasons that it folded on Kimmel, Disney found its courage and he got to say what he wants to say, and the president gets to insult him back, and that is the way the country should be.
Yeah, and your former home, the Wall Street Journal, has stood up to a presidential attack. I think is moving to dismiss his lawsuit there.
Right.
Yep.
That's right. And Trump is now the first, second, and third president to sue for libel while in office. Mm-hmm. He's 0 for 2, and he'll shortly be 0 for 3 in those lawsuits. I really recommend to anybody who's really interested in the law the opinion last week dismissing his lawsuit against the New York Times literally as just facially ridiculous. The judge said, I read this complaint. We have rules in this country for filing complaints. You don't understand them. I'm giving you 28 days to just try again.
Yeah, with fewer pages.
Right. If you were the lawyer who signed that complaint, which you are required to do in federal court, mm-hmm. you should be humiliated.
Yeah. Well, Trump asks people who work for him to humiliate themselves. That's part of what he does, I guess. Hey, I want to ask you a ProPublica question. I mean, it's going back.
Yeah, understanding that, number one, you were very generous at the beginning, but Paul Steiger was actually the founder of ProPublica, and second, none of us did it alone. I ran the business there for 14 years, but I did not do it alone, and in fact, I did it far less than alone. I'm not a journalist, so I'm happy to answer a question. But I retired 4 years ago, but I'm very proud of the place, and I still have a lot of friends there, and I read them closely. So shoot.
Yep. And by the way, I empathize. I ran the Chicago Sun-Times, and I'm not a journalist. There's a challenge to that. It's a wonderful one, but it's a challenge. So I just want to ask about its founding. What was the need you guys saw in a world that wasn't as dangerous for journalism as today? There was more of it than there is today. How did you find a new niche that needed to be filled? That you proved needed to be filled.
Well, first of all, in fairness, it started with the lead funders. There was a couple named Herb and Marion Sandler who had made an enormous amount of money and were active philanthropists, but then they sold their bank for $25 billion, a decent chunk of which came to them, and decided to spend the rest of their lives being full-time philanthropists. And they're both passed away now, but they did spend the rest of their lives as full-time philanthropists. And one of the things they wanted to do, they sensed, and this is in 2006 and 2007, that the business crisis of the press, which was really just beginning, but which was clearly beginning, that some of us saw, including them, was going to significantly pressure investigative reporting, especially because it is expensive and time consuming.
Yes.
And because it heavily depended on local newspapers around the country, who were the people who were feeling the pressure most intensely.
I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
Right. So they ran around the country and talked to people and said, we want to spend a lot of money on investigative journalism. What's the most effective thing to do? And Paul Steiger, who was about to retire as managing editor of the Wall Street Journal, said to them, if I were you, I think things have changed enough that you could form your own newsroom, publish directly online, and you could get actual readership for your stories by publishing the big ones in exclusive partnership with existing news organizations. I
see. So
that was really the breakthrough idea.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. That happens all the time now, mm-hmm. But in 2007, no one had ever done that.
Yeah. And to be fair, journalists are by nature not cooperative. The history is like, it's my scoop, and don't you get in the way. So it was pioneering. It didn't.
Yeah, one of my favorite moments in that regard. So we gave the story of the creation of ProPublica to the New York Times because we could, right? And there's a quote in the announcement story from Bill Keller, who was then mm-hmm. the executive editor of the New York Times, saying, I know these guys, they're nice guys and responsible, and maybe we'll work with them someday.
Yeah.
Long story short, within a couple of years, first ProPublica had won a Pulitzer Prize working with the New York Times when it was still run by Bill Keller.
Mm-hmm.
And 5 years later, Bill Keller ended up in the nonprofit news business as the founding editor of the Marshall Project.
Yep.
And we did another big project and jointly published with them and won another Pulitzer Prize.
Yep.
So people came all the way around in a way that was pretty heartening and sort of funny.
Well, I mean, the biggest takeaway for me that I love is that great journalism finds a way. You know, even in a world that is quick to sue for libel when the truth comes out, the truth comes out, and people who do the work to dig it out, I think that there is always going to be an appetite for that.
One hopes.
One hopes,
and one hopes that people will continue to be permitted to dig it out.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that score, what's wrong with CBS, the idea that Barry Weiss would run CBS?
So, you know, I think the idea that maybe Barry Weiss should have a senior job at CBS, I think the idea, although, you know, they haven't explained it publicly, is that she's a centrist. And, you know, she seems to be more or less in the current American context, a centrist. The problem is it's not a job for someone on the left or someone on the right or in the center. She is an opinion journalist. CBS is a news organization, not an opinion organization. Unlike many newspapers, there's almost no opinion content on CBS.
That's
it's
true.
as if in the old days, you know, when we were kids, somebody had said, I'm going to make Eric Severide the president of CBS News when he was doing a 1-minute opinion thing on the evening news with Walter Cronkite.
Yep.
That would have been ridiculous. And, you know, and I said in my column, it's just like a generation ago, you had said, we're going to make Bill Buckley, who's the editor of the National Review, the head of CBS News, or we're going to make Victor Navasky on the left, who was the editor of The Nation, the head of CBS News. I mean, I knew Victor Navasky. I didn't know William F. Buckley Jr. personally, but they were both interesting journalists. Neither of them were remotely qualified for that job. Barry Weiss has never really been a news reporter. She is an opinion journalist.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to turn CBS News into Substack, then she's a great choice.
Yeah. I mean, look, all the opinion journalism that's out there relies on actual journalists to come up with the stories about which we all have opinions. You can't have a fire with no wood. I mean, it's
right. Yeah, that's exactly. And so that to me is the problem. Is it? And unfortunately, what that suggests, I mean, you know, I certainly understand why she would sell her company for $150 million to Larry Ellison.
Sure. Particularly when it doesn't have much revenue. Yeah, it's a good deal.
What I don't understand is why the Ellisons would think that of all the journalists in America, an opinion journalist is the person who runs CBS News, any opinion journalist.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it makes any more sense. I mean, I get not picking someone on the right, left or someone on the right, but I don't think, frankly, it makes any more sense to pick someone in the center.
That's because you want to feature journalism. And so where does the News Monitor fit into all of this that they have agreed to put in their newsroom?
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't know, right? Because the News Monitor, interestingly, news organizations that have ombuds people, almost always, I mean, I think NPR has one these days and PBS has one and some newspapers around the country still have one. Those people get to publish directly to the readers, viewers, listeners. In the CBS case, and when the New York Times had an ombudsman, when the Washington Post had one, they get to publish directly.
Their discussion was public. Yeah.
Yeah. They were the reader representative. The readers could complain, and the person could then say, I'm the internal critic. Okay. At CBS, the rules of engagement that they've explained in hiring this guy, who also, by the way, has no experience in journalism, is that he is going to report only internally to management. So we have no idea what his advice is going to be. He's not the reader representative unless he chooses to be. We'll never know if he is. I mean, that just to me is, we decided we wanted to bring some internal pressure to bear on people, and this was our mechanism.
Yeah, that's frightening. Well, CBS had a long and great run. I'm glad that, as we've said, there are a lot of sources of news and had a long and great run. Well, let's talk about building trust. Something that, in my experience, local journalism builds both community and trust. If I said, Dick, open a restaurant, on Lexington Avenue, people could go and see it with their own eyes, right? It's affirming of reality in some ways. But with the nationalization of journalism, that's less true. It's a little more abstract. And so how do you build trust?
Well, I mean, I think things that are a move are always a little less true. It'll be a little less, they're harder to relate to. But
confirmable.
Not less true, but they're harder to relate to.
Yeah.
But, to me, the biggest way you build trust in the modern world is with transparency. Mm-hmm. The more you tell people about how you do your work, the more you show your work. Saying where you went to do a story, saying who you talked to, showing the documents that lead to your conclusion, mm-hmm. Including video where it's relevant, including audio where it's relevant, all of that tends to build trust. And then I think readers, listeners, viewers, again, they do keep track informally in their own heads of who steered me right over time and who has not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the Wall Street Journal says a month or two ago, Trump gave this sort of titillating or silly, honestly, but sort of whatever, drawing to Epstein for his birthday, right? But for whatever reason, in terms of their agreement with whoever told them about this, they couldn't show it to you at first. They described it quite thoroughly, a little bit moderately in retrospect.
Yes.
Trump says, never happened. Well, then it comes out in official filings released by the government. Well, actually, it seems to have happened. We now have a picture of it. It is exactly as described. It's actually a little more gross than it was described originally. Yep. He's sued them. As you indicated earlier, that lawsuit is very soon, I think, going to be dismissed as ridiculous. You should learn from that, I think, that Donald Trump at least sometimes lies, and the Wall Street Journal at least sometimes carefully tells you the truth.
Yeah, I think you would be, if that's not a lesson you've learned by now, you've been asleep for 20 years.
Well, but
I agree with you. It's confirming of who you should trust.
Right.
Yeah. Released not by the government. I think this was released by the estate of Jeffrey Epstein.
Right, but I thought through a congressional committee. I thought in response to a subpoena.
Yeah, absolutely right. That's right. But I'm saying the government has its own documents that it hasn't released.
Well, the executive branch has not released any documents. The legislative branch has been quite forthcoming, actually, about this. It's the executive branch that's still stonewalling.
I'm just thinking about like the Pentagon now says, right, you can't get a press pass unless you report the things we say you can report.
Well, it's worse than that. I mean, just so people understand the details, I'm actually going to, I think, write about this in the next couple of weeks.
Yep.
The Pentagon has said, we want you to sign an agreement if you want to be admitted to this building, right,
yep.
which is the largest office building in the country, paid for and maintained with literally billions of taxpayer dollars.
Right.
You can't come into the largest office building in the country that you paid for unless you agree in writing that you won't publish any classified information. Now, first of all, that's ridiculous because most disclosures of classified information occur when they are leaked by the government.
Right.
Second, you can't publish any non-classified information unless we have specifically approved it.
Yep.
So even if it's not a secret, even if its disclosure would not damage the national security, according to us, you may not publish it unless we give you permission to. That literally is the same rule of engagement that they have in the Kremlin
yep.
and in Beijing.
Yep. And, well, these are role models. So I think this is maybe good news in some way. And here's why. I think journalists, they're great journalists, but a lot of journalists are lazy and report what they say. And they go to they get their press pass, they go in and they just say, oh, today the president said, today Pete Hegseth said. What they say are lies. If they don't, this way, real journalists are going to report and they're going to work really hard to get sources, to get information, and they're going to still find the truth despite this ban. And they might have to work hard.
I hope so.
Report the lies.
I hope so. I hope that the response to this is going to be, we're not signing your stupid agreement.
Absolutely.
And if you want to play the game this way, we just won't go into your office building, notwithstanding that we pay for it.
Yep.
And we'll do our work from outside the building.
Yeah. They'll get people who will sign and go in. But right now in the White House press briefings, if the room is filled with people who ask questions like, sir, who's the great tailor who made your suit? There's going to be that. But I don't think Americans are fooled.
I do hope, though, that the press is going to resist on this. I continue to think that a big mistake was made when the Associated Press's access to the pools in the White House was limited back in February, that the rest of the press did not object to that. That, just to remind people, was done because the president insists that what everyone else in America calls the Gulf of Mexico must be called the Gulf of America.
Yep.
Okay. He can call whatever he wants. I assume he'll soon be renaming things after himself. And he's already starting to name aspects of the government after himself. But in any event, he's allowed to call it that. He's not allowed to insist everyone else call it that.
Yeah.
And just so folks understand what's going on here, that's what's called the style book of the Associated Press. They have rules, and they actually are the leading style book in American journalism. And they sort of decide what gets capitalized and what gets spelled with an O and what gets spelled with an OU and all that kind of silly stuff. The president's trying to write those rules himself. Just so people understand, this is as if somebody else came into the White House and said, I insist you all put your pronouns in your bylines. And if you won't, you can't come in here.
Yeah. It's really
that would be unbelievably offensive and deeply wrong.
It's government censorship fully, and not just censorship in the sense of what you can't say, but what you must say, or government propaganda and censorship fully. Yeah. Well, Dick, we're out of time. I'm so grateful that you spent your morning with me and us, and it's terrific to meet you.
Edwin, great to meet you as well. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet.
You're looking at the big picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. I am thrilled to be joined by Lisa Graves again. She is, of course, an award-winning investigative researcher. She's the author of Without Precedent, How Chief Justice Roberts and His Accomplishment, boy, I can't talk this afternoon, and his accomplices rewrote the Constitution and dismantled our rights. She's founder and executive director of True North Research, and the author of the Grave Injustice column newsletter on Substack. Look, she and I have long shared a great secret, and it's a secret neither of us wanted to keep. In fact, we've done our best not to keep it, and it's finally getting out. That secret is, of course, that John Roberts is the worst, most dangerous Chief Justice we've ever had. And the last time we talked, Lisa and I walked through the line of Roberts Court decisions that have done so much to bring us here to this moment by undermining voting rights and empowering moneyed interests. It was in some ways a preview of her newest book, Without Precedent, How Chief Justice Roberts and His Accomplice. What? No, you have a new book and has a different name.
No, that's the new book.
That's the new book. Right, that's the new book. Yeah, and it is coming out like this week.
Yes, on Tuesday. It's my very first book, but it's been
congratulations.
So long, it seems like two books.
Right. No, congratulations. Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Edwin. I'm so. It was a labor of love, and I was writing it on the weekends last fall and on my vacation last August to get it in by the end of the year so that it could get into the production schedule so that it could be out now at the end of September to mark the 20th anniversary of Roberts' confirmation to the Supreme Court and the opening of this new Supreme Court term, which I anticipated then would be an ongoing disaster because of John Roberts and his fellow, the faction there that has been dismantling our rights.
Yeah, well, I hope it is a grand bestseller because this should not be a secret that, you and I and a few others know. Everybody should know about this disaster.
Well, that's right. It is a secret you and I have shared for quite some time that this is, despite Roberts' efforts to construct in the public's mind this notion that he was going to be a fair umpire just calling balls and strikes. In fact, he wasn't, and in my view, he was never going to be that fair umpire. He was put on the court, chosen for the court because he was believed to be a sure vote for this right-wing agenda, and at the helm of the Supreme Court, he has used the court to advance that agenda with a lot of patience, but with a continued determination to dismantle major precedents that protect our rights and rewrite the Constitution and rewrite our statutes, as we've seen on steroids these past few months in particular, with the rulings overturning lower court temporary restraining orders, in addition to the just devastating and terrible and counter-constitutional decision last year that Roberts orchestrated to give Donald Trump immunity from criminal prosecution.
Yeah, no, unconscionable. But that one, at least, they had to hear oral arguments and show their work, as shoddy as it is. What they've done this time is to, without even the courage of their signatures on a page, erase parts of the Constitution.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, this shadow docket, this use of the emergency docket to overturn these well-reasoned, well-written, signed opinions by lower court judges upholding longstanding statutes, constitutional interpretation, and more. It really is a debacle, and it is cowardly, and it's doing this in the dark of night. Now, of course, their defenders say, well, these aren't final decisions. They have, there'll be a final decision on the substantive merits. Meanwhile, the wrecking crew that this administration has put into place in these various appointments is wrecking key components of our civil society, including trying to rip away grants for cancer research and more, including this effort to divert money basically away from how Congress, by bipartisan votes, sign into law by a president, how Congress allocated funds, and just doing whatever Trump wants with those funds. That was the most recent ruling this past week. It's just, it is really outrageous, and this court is usurping the power of our representatives in Congress, and it is empowering a president who believes that he has no limits on his power.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. I mean, you and I always focus on the court for all the reasons that you just mentioned, and because, oh my gosh, it's so important. But let's talk about what this empowered lawless administration is doing, because the court lets them. So why don't we start with, like, James Comey?
Yeah, this is really extraordinary. As many people saw about a week ago, Trump sent a message to Pam Bondi. Many people believed it was intended to be a direct message, a private message, saying she needed to get on the prosecution of his enemies, of his opponents. And this, of course, comes on the heels of his statement at the memorial service about how he hates his opponents. And then what happened, in essence, was that in the Eastern District of Virginia, which is part of the federal court system that's in Northern Virginia, the U.S. attorney that Trump had appointed to that role refused to do that bidding. And so Trump appointed yet another former defense attorney, and I say former in quotation marks, because she's now being paid by us as the interim U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. And she was previously one of his defense counsels whose primary background was in insurance law, not as a prosecutor. She hasn't had the type of experience you would expect to be a federal prosecutor, but she was willing to pursue that indictment of James Comey and to do so in time right before the statute of limitations would have expired for the claims they're making about his testimony before Congress. He has said that he's innocent. He said, bring on the trial, but he's also said to the American people, we should not be afraid of this administration. We cannot live on our knees, and they will. And he said that they will not live on their knees, and they hope other Americans will also not live on their knees in the face of Trump's efforts to go after his political enemies.
Yeah, I mean, the evidence was not sufficient for a seasoned U.S. attorney to make the case. One of the three counts, a grand jury said no to. This new U.S. attorney she probably didn't even have time to read the stuff before she put her name on it. And now she is so overmatched with Comey's attorney, who was Patrick Fitzgerald, who was here in Illinois as a U.S. attorney.
Yeah.
Enormously talented guy. I expect that Trump's own words, that tweet you talked about, might be sufficient just to end this, but then there'll be litigation going the other way.
Well, I mean, it's extraordinary. And as you point out, actually, the magistrate judge in that case, Judge Vala, expressed confusion because this former defense attorney for Trump handed in two different indictments, one in which Comey was not indicted and one in which he was, and both had her signature on it. And she said, she responded to the court by saying she hadn't seen that version of the indictment that bore her signature. And the magistrate judge said, you didn't see that? You didn't see the indictment that the grand jury refused, that you signed? And she said she had not. So this is already starting as part of the continuing sort of clown show of this administration.
So does she have an auto pen, or is she just perjury on day one?
Right. I mean, it's just extraordinary that they would hand in two indictments to the court, and to have this person just installed at the last minute to basically do Trump's bidding. And we've seen other instances where Trump has sought to remove U.S. attorneys from their positions because they refuse to follow his command. We saw that in New York with the effort. With the effort of the U.S. attorney and other prosecutors in response to the demand by the Justice Department that they go along with this Eric Adams deal to dismiss the corruption charges against him without prejudice, so that it could be refiled, while they basically, signaled that they would be pressuring him to allow Trump to do whatever he wanted in terms of New York City and ICE and more.
The judge wouldn't go along with them.
Yeah, the judge would not go along with it because, of course, you shouldn't be able to use the potential to recharge as some sort of potential blackmail or threat, to try to get cooperation from a public official, a democratically elected public official who, I read that indictment, and it was compelling, in my view, in the accusations of his corruption there in New York City. Eric Adams, who's running again, by the way. By
the way, he is clear he won't be all that corruption. Let's just assume, for the sake of this conversation, he is guilty of, even though he hasn't had his day in court. But he isn't going to get a day in court, and no one's going to be able to prove that he did these things because the Trump administration so abused the law that Adams now gets a free ride.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. He pleaded that he was innocent, so we don't know, and we don't even know whether all that evidence will ultimately become fully public, the evidence against him, because of this, because of that, because the case against him has been dismissed. But that's just one of many things this administration has done, and I have to say, this really is crossing a line. There are many lines that have been crossed by this administration over these past 8+ months. But this line, to go after someone Trump has described as his enemy, to try to prosecute him, to throw him in jail, is extraordinary in American history. And even though some of the Trump apologists will say, oh, this is just tit for tat because you were investigating, because the government was investigating Trump. Well, the government was investigating Donald Trump because there was evidence that we all saw of him inciting a riot that ended up costing law enforcement officers their lives and injuring numerous Capitol Police and wrecking the front of the U.S. Capitol in an effort to stop the presidential vote in 2020 from being counted, and other efforts as well by Donald Trump. And so,
in fairness, we didn't get that case. We didn't get that case because Judge Cannon and others and the Supreme Court acted in such a way that Trump never had a trial on that.
No, that's right.
He was convicted of different felonies.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He was not convicted of that. And in that other case involving the taking of secret documents, including top secret documents, eyes-only documents for our most sensitive documents. That
the
was
ones he decorated his bathroom with. In those boxes.
Yeah, the bathroom. So there were legitimate investigations of Donald Trump that were grounded in accusations of the violation of federal law, important law, and there were those investigations were pursued not instantaneously. And in essence, like the Jack Smith investigation began only after Congress concluded its investigation in that January 6th inquiry. And so it was late, and Biden stayed out of it, and the Justice Department stayed out of it. They appointed a special counsel to examine whether charges should be brought, with no pressure on Jack Smith to do so. And in this instance, you have the president himself directing the attorney general to do his bidding. And this is a president who 9 years ago, in 2016, went on a rampage verbally complaining that Bill Clinton had met briefly on the plane on a tarmac with the Attorney General Loretta Lynn, and claiming that this was so inappropriate for his opponent's husband to even meet with the Attorney General for a few minutes. They said that they talked about their kids. They didn't talk about Hillary Clinton. They didn't talk about the email controversy that Donald Trump was pushing. But just 9 years ago, that was the posture, because it would be inappropriate for a president or a president's, top aide to be pressuring the Justice Department to pursue a prosecution or not to pursue a prosecution. Now, here we are almost a decade into since then, with a president who is emboldened to think that's exactly what he should be doing, and that he has a right to tell the Justice Department what to do and a right to tell the FBI what to do. These are very dangerous actions by this president for the security of all people's civil liberties, not just James Comey.
Yeah, I mean, and in his last at bat, Trump got a special prosecutor, John Durham, I think his name was, to go look at how those investigations into Trump were predicated, and he was going to investigate the investigators just because he said, look, it isn't fair what happened to me. And it turns out it was fair. And John Durham did not convict anybody. Lost every time he tried.
John Durham is another Republican former U.S. attorney who has had a widely respected reputation, and he looked into the claims that the investigations around Russia's interference in the 2016 election were legitimate. And in fact, I would say to you, as someone who previously worked on national security issues, I did a lot of work for about 4 or 5 years on the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act and national security provisions, applying within the United States and abroad. And the fact is that the job of the National Security Agency, the NSA, is to monitor the communications of foreign agents, meaning foreign officials, foreign presidents, foreign agencies, with U.S. people in the United States as part of the foreign intelligence gathering to protect our national security. And so there was no targeting of Trump. There was the fact that people around Trump were on audio talking to Russian officials or trying to meet up with Russian officials. And in fact, the evidence suggested, and in fact, there was a guilty plea on this one. The evidence suggested that Trump's national security advisor, General Flynn, was attempting to set up like a separate communication line with Russia outside of our official communications, encrypted, secure communications, which are the way that the president typically interacts with Russia and with foreign powers. And so there were a number of those investigations surrounding Trump, and Trump himself called for Putin to get Hillary's files. And we know from the public record that came out afterward that Russia was spending millions of dollars on basically sort of bot farms or ad farms, trying to run ads in 2016 on Facebook to try to divide Americans and help Trump win that election. Those are facts.
So when Trump says, "I'm going after my opponents because you went after me," it is in every way inaccurate, because he wasn't targeted. In fact, very slowly did the government say, "Oh my gosh, look at all this evidence. We really don't have a choice. We have to move forward." Now, that may not be completely the case with the real estate litigation that he was found guilty of in New York. That wouldn't have been my choice. But he was found guilty unanimously by his peers. So, we're going to see here what happens, but I don't expect this to last even very long. I think the pushback is going to be enormous, and I don't think this new acting U.S. attorney and her team has the skill or the talent, and they don't have the evidence to make this last very long.
Yeah, it is so troubling. And Trump signaled immediately afterward that there were more prosecutions coming. He has a list, and in fact, one of the closing arguments of Kamala Harris in that campaign last year was saying he has a list of his revenge tour, his retribution tour of what he would do as president, how he would in essence abuse that office. And we've seen him put people into positions of significant power, like Tulsi Gabbard over at the director of National Intelligence, trying to aid him politically by trying to discredit the national security agencies, who are non-political civil servants who have been devoted to protecting the United States from the most significant threats we may face as a nation from other countries or from terrorist groups. And she recently, not only did she try to basically discredit those agencies in support of Trump's claims, she recently, just this past week, ended the practice of the Director of National Intelligence from issuing prospective threat assessments on behalf of the American people.
I read that, and let's slow down, because that went by fast, and when I read it, I had gasped. So tell everybody what this annual report is, and that she has decided we don't need.
Yes, well, this is a periodic report, and it basically gathers together Yes. It gathers together the best information that has been vetted. This isn't, like the Steele memo, the dossier, which was based on raw intelligence and rumors and some truths,
right.
but some rumors. This is information that is gathered from our various intelligence agencies and operatives. This is both, SIGINT, signals intelligence. It includes, OSINT, open source intelligence. It includes, human sources who may be, are spies in other countries who are trying to protect us. It includes this array of information as well as satellite intelligence as well to assess the threat that America may face from the movements of other countries or movements in other countries that may pose a threat to the American people, to our national security, to our economy, for example, with cyber terrorism or an effort to, interfere with our electrical system, our grid, interfere with our banking system, et cetera. And so,
careful, important report that the intelligence community provides so that the rest of the government can do its job in ways to protect us.
Yes.
Yeah. And she said, don't need it.
It's extraordinary because it helps us set forth long-term policy. So when you see some of these budgets, and obviously now we're in the middle of this potential crisis of the government shutdown happening, but when you see congressional budgets in general, if you practice in this field, you see long-term plans that the government engages in. So, for example, you have to anticipate some of the threats that may be emerging threats. You have to allocate budget now to build and expand systems to protect us from those ongoing threats. And the sort of unilateral determination by Tulsi Gabbard, who in my view should not have been confirmed as the DNI, but is the DNI, to use her power to basically sort of shutter this very important report is very troubling. And it is the case that it's not just that the U.S. has a right-wing movement that, from a documented standpoint, documents that were online at the U.S. Department of Justice and other agencies showed that the prevalent political violence in the United States is predominantly generated by right-wing groups. That's not to say there's no left-wing violence, but the trend, which has been documented no matter who's been president until now, has shown that in recent decades that threat has predominantly come from right-wing movements. We know that there are other right-wing movements in other countries, some of which have been in communication with right-wing movements here in the U.S., who have a disdain for democracy, who have a disdain for equality. And so I don't know whether there was discomfort with the intelligence agencies monitoring those right-wing movements abroad, or whether it's part of the, kid gloves that Trump sometimes uses with Putin, or some other factor. But the fact is that blinding our anticipatory work to protect our nation from threats from both foreign governments and foreign movements that may be in touch with people in the United States is, I think, a reckless decision by this director.
Yeah, I love talking to you because you don't ever shy away from telling me what you think.
Yeah. I appreciate the same with you, Edwin. I was there when, I was around. I was working on these issues as that DNI post was created. I knew people who worked as the civil liberties officers, within the Director of National Intelligence, within the DNI. From the outside at the Center for National Security Studies, as well as at the ACLU, I provided testimony before Congress about how to protect our civil liberties, so that these weapons, the weapons that the Director of National Intelligence has at his or her ready, are not turned on the American people, but are focused appropriately on foreign threats. So my focus has been on how do we protect the interests and privacy interests of the American people, of innocent Americans, from these tools being misused, but also to affirm that the importance of those tools is to direct them at other countries in a way that is fact-based, that is reality-based, that's based on, real satellite imagery, real intelligence from trusted agents in the field, to make sure that the American people and our institutions, our democracy, is safe. So this is just another unwinding by the Trump administration of a vital tool that was intended to keep us safe and has been used to help keep us safe.
Yeah, makes us less safe, and the threat is it makes us less free, too. Really terrible. Yeah. Hey, speaking of foreign threats, could we just spend a minute on the dear leader's hour-long diatribe at the UN?
Yes, I have to confess to you that in general, I don't watch these things live as they're happening. I read the transcripts, and then I go back and look at select parts. So I read the whole transcript. It's over 56 minutes.
I watched the whole thing. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. Well, what struck you? I have plenty.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it was a profoundly disrespectful speech by an American president to a room of the leaders of other countries, many of whom have been longstanding allies of America. And it was embarrassing also, not just insulting, but embarrassing, because he repeated ridiculous claims in his attacks on measures to mitigate the climate changes that are obviously underway, his attacks on windmills, the science denial that was expressed in that speech is just profoundly disturbing. And I think it weakens the United States in the eyes of their countries, although I think we've been weakened because of other statements he's made. And also, it's just a few months ago when he had that announcement, on the lawn of the White House using apparently AI-generated data to impose tariffs on every country except for Russia, North Korea, including imposing tariffs on the Penguin Islands. So it's not as though we were at a high point of respect by foreign nations, but they've seen him use the tariffs as sort of a shakedown effort to try to get concessions. And we've even seen, him back off of some of these tariff threats. So it's not as though his reputation is one that is holding America in high regard. They're dealing with a strong man, someone who's treating the office of the president as his own personal plaything, in essence, to impose punishment on people who he doesn't like, countries he doesn't like, or who have not given him a gift of some sort, come and sort of kneeled to him in his office and praised him before the cameras, before the now gilded Oval Office. So, I thought it was a shocking speech. I think it may be one of the. I think it's the worst speech a president of the United States has ever given to the United Nations in its history. I do think, obviously, when Colin Powell was given the speech to propel the lies about Iraq seeking nuclear weapons, during the Bush administration, that was a low point
dangerous.
for the States. But this speech, in those 56 minutes, I think Trump said numerous things that both damaged America's reputation and were just plain false.
Yeah, Colin Powell's speech caused enormous damage in the world, was inaccurate, and a very low moment. The difference, though, was that although inaccurate, the appeal was to values that we understand. Trump's speech describes a world antithetical to American values. He was bragging about, look, if we don't like it, we don't care what the UN says, we're going to blow the boats up in the water. Look, we don't care that we're not at war with Iran. We're going to blow them. We're more powerful. We're just going to do what we want to do. I don't care if this is an international body. You're not part of peacekeeping. I saved the world. I made peace all over the world. You had nothing to do with it. These are not our values. And on immigration, I mean, you talk about climate change, also not our values. And that like oil is everything. That's not an American value. And on immigration, he said, look, I don't mind diversity in the world, but like if you're black, you stay in a black country. If you're Latino, stay in a Latino country. We don't want things that we aren't used to in our country. Where is a nation of immigrants? Where is tolerance of other religions? It was a speech that no American could give if they studied our history, if they cared about our shared values, if they love anything about the ideals of this country.
Well, that's right. If it were in some sort of eighth grade or 12th grade civics class, it would get an F for being so filled with falsehoods. And the idea that he ended 7 unendable wars, absurd
Nonsense,
claims
right,
that he made.
Absurd.
And then,
right.
Absurd.
And by the way, if you'd only paid me, I'd have given you marble floors, and you're stuck with terrazzo. I mean, he's also just nuts.
The pettiness. Yeah, the pettiness that he thinks that he should have been in charge of the renovation of the United Nations, which, by the way, is a beautiful building that is not plagued with this sort of, the tyranny, the tyrannical leaders, gold, that we've seen other countries like, Saddam Hussein's, gold gilded chambers, et cetera. Like, I sort of shudder. I just think. I personally am glad he didn't get that contract. I'm glad that the United Nations, has facilities that have not been, subjected to his gilding. But the idea that matters at all, that it should even be part of a speech that any president gives to the United Nations, to this address of the world, is extraordinary. It just shows yet again how selfish, how self-interested, how egotistical, how petty this person is who has these vast powers. Yeah. And as you point out, the idea that, they're just going to, violate international law whenever they want to blow up boats. These were open air boats. We're not at war. These were civilians. We haven't seen a shred of the evidence that they claim existed to target these ships.
Could have stopped any of those boats. Could have stopped any of them. They were turned around and heading back, so not a threat. But they just rather blow them up. It makes them happy to blow them up.
Yeah, and the job of the Coast Guard every day out there on our coast is, monitoring our coastline. If someone is trying to come aboard, if there's drug smuggling, they're interdicting it, arresting people. And also, it is not actually a death penalty offense for someone to engage in drug smuggling. They should not engage in drug smuggling. There are severe federal penalties, and rightly so, for doing so. But the United States doesn't get to engage in summary execution of people who have not been charged, tried, and convicted of a crime. That's a standard of the rule of law.
So let's go back where we came from. But this president can't be held liable for any of it because John Roberts said no law applies.
Right. Well, the fact that in that immunity ruling in Trump versus United States, what John Roberts orchestrated was an unprecedented ruling saying that if the president does it, claiming he's engaged in a quote official act as president, including his words, then he cannot be charged with a crime, period, even though the Constitution says the president's duty is to faithfully execute the law, and the Constitution expressly says that presidents can be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors. It doesn't imply that a president can't commit crimes or can get away with crimes.
No, terrible. But he brought us here. By the way, we have to be done, but someday you're going to tell me how to square that ruling with this idea that the president can't take emoluments, because by definition, that would be part of in his official capacity. I just think they just erased part of the Constitution. No,
they did, and they did so. And I know we've got around, but for this court to be behaving this way, emboldening Trump, when they blocked Biden from adopting even modest student loan debt relief, to say that was inappropriate, unlawful, even though it was under a statute allowing emergency debt relief in times of emergencies, this court is showing how partisan it is. John Roberts has revealed how partisan he is, and my book helps tell that story.
Yeah, please, everybody, get Lisa's book. Lisa, where do they get it?
You can get it at any bookstore or online. Any bookstore you use or online. It's Without Precedent. It's available, for purchase now, but it is actually physically available as of Tuesday. I've got a website called withoutprecedent.info, but you can also just Google Without Precedent and Lisa Graves, and you'll find it.
Yeah, and for everybody, I will also put it on social media. Lisa, thank you, as always. It's a great pleasure.
It's an honor to talk with you anytime, Edwin. Thank you so much for inviting me on your show.
You bet. Bye. Bye. All right, everybody, quick break and your calls.
Edwin Eisendrath is taking your calls now at 773-763-9278. The Big Picture is on now. WCPT 820.
Forgive me for running a little long, everybody, but that means we're going to go about 3 minutes each with these calls and no more to try and get everybody in. Jim, kick us off.
Hi, Edwin. Yeah, TikTok, the Republicans are supporting the free flow of information. Larry Ellison got a huge piece. The Saudis got a huge piece, who gave $2 billion to Trump for his crypto scheme. And then to mention the $20 billion he lending to that dictator down in, I think it's Argentina, for the midterms. So, I mean, the criminality is off in the – I mean, give me a break. You know, I've been in Chicago all my life. I've seen a few guys take a few bucks and go to jail. These people are in another stratosphere.
Never seen anything like it.
No, this is insane. But think of it, TikTok. Well, TikTok, I mean, think of the generations influenced by this garbage that these people are going to put at us. That's what disturbs me. Anyway, thank you, Edwin. Take care.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Eduardo.
Yeah, thank you, Edwin. Well, I wanted to comment about these singers are from Colombia, Byron Sanchez and Jorge Herrera. These people are missing. I think 11 years that country in Mexico has been protesting the fact that so many people are missing. The other day I saw a truck going through an entrance, and that's happened before. So I think President Schomburg needs to pay more attention to her citizens as far as finding those people if they're alive. So that's my comment for today.
It's a good one, and one that is a story I don't know well. I've heard about it, but maybe I'll look more. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Roosevelt, you're next.
Lee, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes. Loud and clear.
How can everybody criticize Mexico when right here people are disappearing? In this city,
well, it's not okay anywhere. Not okay anywhere.
But don't you pay attention to the country you live in and criticize this country first? Especially to the people such as the young man that just called. Your own people are disappearing, Mr. Criticizing President of Mexico. So before we start looking to other countries, we've got to start looking here.
In fairness, just pointing out something that he asked the president to look a little more carefully at in Mexico. But you're certainly right. We got plenty here to worry about. Yep.
That makes me mad. That makes me so mad. You're going to criticize another country, which is a country that Trump has criticized. Notice the type of people that call this station, and especially your program. They tell you what they are. They're MAGA.
Eduardo's called before. I don't think that's right. I don't.
I disagree with you. Anyway, I want to tell you what I really called about. What the heck is going on in Venezuela? Do you think that Venezuela doesn't have backup from China and Russia? Don't they have millions or billions of dollars, especially China, invested loans to Venezuela for oil? China, do you think that Trump is going to start a war in Venezuela? Really? Really? All these boats that he's sending down there and all this stuff? That's my point. Let's look at what's going on here. Go ahead.
I have no idea what Trump wants to do in Venezuela. I have no idea. And I don't know that he does. Like every day changes his mind. How about Hegseth having all the generals there? Now, the word is that he's called all these generals from all over the world to leave their posts, fly to Washington, to sit in one room together, which we never allow because God forbid something should happen, right? I mean, it's the least secure, most dangerous thing I've ever heard a Secretary of Defense do. And he's there to give him a speech about warrior ethos, or do you think he's telling him, hey, Venezuela's next? We don't know. Because, right? We're just Americans. What are we supposed to know about how our military is being used in the world?
And in closing, sorry to interrupt, but in closing, what Jim said $20 billion going to Argentina, to Javier Milei. And remember, that's the guy with the electric saw at CPAC next to Elon Musk. Remember that? They were laughing at the cut that they were laughing at the cut that they were going to make to Medicare. They were laughing at us, at all these cuts that are coming up with that 2025 project BS. That's it. I want to cut it off because I know you got more calls.
Good points. All right. Thank you, Roosevelt. Dave, you're next.
Hey, Edwin. Yeah, to tag on what you mentioned about with Hegseth, I'm wondering if he's doing like Hitler did, calling all in, have them clutching the flag with the left and then holding up the right hand with three fingers, the thumb and two fingers, and pledging allegiance to, and loyalty to Trump. And if not, that they'll get relieved right on the spot because, like you're saying, being that dangerous, he could have been in the skiff like he should have instead of using the WhatsApp, and could have contacted them that way, if they're whatever it is supposed to be so important. And hey, did you see where Bill Berrien quit the Wisconsin governor's run?
No, I missed that.
Yeah, that's the latest, and then also it ain't only because of that stuff with the trans, the sites that he's been on, but also these conservatives have been kind of questioning his viability because of in 24 he had actually supported Nikki Haley, and in 2020 he said that he hadn't decided whether to support Trump. And then look at it.
That's a crime in the right. That's a crime in the Republican Party.
Yeah, well, the only thing they cared about was with that transsexual or whatever. But close you with this one, and then maybe the rapture's still on because was it yesterday the superintendent from that Oklahoma school had resigned?
Yep.
So anyway,
crazy world.
Get out of here. All right, Edwin.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Appreciate you too. Paul, you're next.
Yeah, Edwin, I hope there's a chapter in Lisa's book making the case for impeaching John Roberts, because that's exactly what I asked my representative in Congress to consider when the Democrats take control of the House at least one more time, or again in the next term, that even if Roberts is not removed from office, he definitely deserves a black eye on his record for what he has done. And, he can follow that up with Samuel Alito. Maybe that'll scare Clarence Thomas into retirement. But Roberts has that coming. This ruling about this week about allowing Trump to impound, even temporarily, congressional, funds that have been allocated and passed into law, allocated by Congress and passed into law. I think there was something called the 1974 Congressional Budget and Impoundment Act. This is what Nixon tried to do and lost in the Supreme Court in 1974, and the act was passed in July, just weeks before he resigned. That's also, technically, I believe, the law, the legal case about Trump's first impeachment.
I know. In this case, Paul, it's worse. Because we're at the end of the fiscal year, this impoundment is not temporary. It's permanent. It's done. Yeah. Because, right, so it is this is again the majority at Supreme Court having contempt for the actual law and playing partisan politics at that court. It just further erodes any possible credibility they have.
Yeah, effectively, it is. You're right, because it's the end of the fiscal court. And this is what came out in, and I don't know, you didn't mention my name, the law professor at University of Texas, Stephen Vladeck, wrote the book called The Shadow Docket. And
he
said
did indeed.
This is what the court repeatedly did in Trump's first term, is to take cases from the Solicitor General and, all time on cases that had no chance of winning on the merits, but in the time frame or the window were allowed to do its damage just because that the Solicitor General would appeal a lower court ruling and then say, "Oh, we don't want to do oral arguments right away. Just put that. We're happy to wait 6 to 8, 10 months," and that's what the court did. And John Roberts is made a mockery and a wreck of the court. And by the way, not only this financial thing, but does anybody believe the now third estimate from the Bureau of Economic Analysis that second quarter growth was 3.8%? The original estimate, I was flabbergasted when I heard that because I would have perked up my ears about that. The original estimate was 2.8%. So their third estimate is an increase of a third? Really? Well, I don't believe anything that comes out of statistics. Look at this. First of all, and this was based on consumer spending. The University of Michigan Consumer Confidence Index has been on its lips for the last 4 months. I don't believe that there's consumer spending. And not only that, over the last 4 months, of course, job creation in 4 months was only 133,000 jobs adjusted. That's a poor report for 1 month. And that was what 4 months was. And so there's nothing that we can believe that comes out of this administration or the federal government at all. Nothing. It's entirely lost its credibility, and thanks also to the courts. I mean, how can you argue with me? Can anybody argue with that?
Well, people can argue about anything. Doesn't make it right.
Well, that's true, but I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a Charlie Kirk argument that says prove me wrong. I'm talking about one that has facts and rationale behind it.
Look,
I mean, the court.
The justices can't hide behind their robes. We know who they are. We know how they think, and how they think is not jurisprudential. It's increasingly political and partisan, and that erodes one of the most important institutions in our country and is dangerous. We know the administration is lawless and dishonest and corrupt. We know all of this. The question for you and for me is, what are we doing about it now? And, I don't think they're going to win, because we are starting to do things about it, which is fabulous. The fact that no reporting organization that matters is signed on to Pete Hegseth's stupid agreement in the Pentagon is a very big deal, right? Because months ago, people were rushing to bend the knee. I just, the fact that they thought they could censor a comic off of TV and get away with it, and they were forced, even Sinclair and Nexstar, to bring them back. They can't always get away with it. If we stand up and we stand together, we push back, we have a chance not just to survive this, but to build a governing majority that will bury it in the ash heap where it belongs. Because every time we talk about them, it's just, criminal, corrupt, crazy. But that doesn't mean it's our future.
Well, let me finish here. Just for people who would say, people on the right who would say, well, I'm just a whiny liberal that doesn't like the court's decisions and that they're really not partisan, I would say this. Okay, first of all, the John Roberts, when he clerked for William Rehnquist, said that, and I won't do the quote, I'll just say, as part of this quote, he said, the court, it is generally accepted that the court can only hear about 150 cases per term. He said, and that gives the same assurance as when the court adjourns in the summer, or adjourns in June, and the Constitution is safe for the summer. It's the famous quote. But at that point, he said that the court can hear 150 cases per term. The court actually used to hear over 300 cases 100 years ago. Okay, 150. Now the court is only hearing about 60 or 60. And by the way, most court cases, besides the controversial ones, more than 50% of the cases, 60% of the cases are 9-0 rulings. But the court's only hearing 60, 70 cases a year. The court is now only hearing cases that sort of tap the political. They're not hearing cases. They're only hearing cases that have to do with holding up Donald Trump's. Basically, a lot of them are holding up his complaints. They're not even hearing
150 cases. I'm not even hearing half that many now.
No, Trump has taken all the oxygen out of the Supreme Court. It's all part of the same thing. Paul, that's got to be our last word today.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. And thank all of you today. And I will see you again next week. In the meantime, get out there, talk to your friends, stay organized. You know what? We are, I know it doesn't look like it because he's got all the news, but we're winning. We're winning these fights. Have some joy in that. We're going to take it back. Take care, everybody.